I'm like, bro, I don't have the fucking time. Can you just tell
Read
me what it
Science
is?
of Logic. Read it right
Hmm.
now. Open
No,
the
you,
book.
you should not
I
read
could generate a
Hegel.
1,000 page,
I
like multi-page, multi
nah,
fucking.
I'm here to tell you should not read Hegel. You got better things to do with your life.
Yeah, dude,
I
read
really like.
Schopenhauer. It'll make you want
I'm
to kill yourself.
I'm past the point
Oh,
on politics
okay.
of trying about reading about like or trying about reading like political philosophy books because honestly, I have better things to do in my life than read 20 Marx books or like five different
Don't do
analysis of
Marx. That'll
capitalism.
also make
Read
you want to kill
Marx.
yourself.
Read Lenin.
Nah,
Read
bro.
Stalin.
Why are you doing this, dude, bro?
Make Lenin.
Dude,
Make about 20
communist
yards of it.
grindset, dude.
Kiss Lemon.
Yeah, dude, read Nietzsche. That guy's good.
Now, okay, like
Nah, he
you
sucks.
mentioned Schopenhauer wanting to make you kill yourself. Like, why is that? Okay,
Bro,
because
have
like
you
I have
read
heard.
Schopenhauer?
It's
Yeah,
because he's
actually,
a
I'm going to
woman.
comment on that because I had heard forever. Oh, Schopenhauer is like a really good stylist, but then I tried to read a section of the
Bro,
World on Will on
what?
representation, and it is the worst shit I have ever read. Because in 12
That's what I'm
pages, it took him 12 pages to say something that only took one page, and I was like, "What the fuck?"
saying.
Like
Average
the
Bro,
left
whole
is
German
trying to
autism
explain.
go Bert, bro. Schopenhauer is
Average left is
wild.
trying to explain their ideology.
Schopenhauer is literally just black pill and like you should kill yourself. Like
He's
TLDR
right.
Schopenhauer, that's literally
He
it.
was right the entire time.
Yeah, he's based. I tell everyone to read him.
What's the book about? Oh, it's a book about telling you to kill yourself, but you should still read it because you should.
nah, but that's not as
Maybe if
hardcore as the guy from
Schopenhauer,
Harvard.
maybe if he looks maxed, he would be able to pull his 17-year-old shorty
On God, bro's got to
and
start
Right?
mogging,
inseminate
and
him.
leftists have got to start mogging, and then people are gonna start reading their books. Like if Frederick Nietzsche sets his cheeks in, I'd read the shit out of whatever the hell he had to say.
Actually liked Nietzsche though. Well, some of his stuff.
You know,
I
what's the
thought
best way to piss off
Zarathustra was
a Frederick Nietzsche fan?
yeah. I
Fred
thought
Nietzsche.
Zarathustra was his best work, to be honest.
I'm not a big fan of Fred Nietzsche. You know,
He's alright. He gets kind of like megalomaniac-y because he's definitely like a narc. But, I think he's a cool guy. I think he had some good ideas.
he's an op.
Yep, he's an op.
So what's Hegelian philosophy?
Op speed market. Ask the
Uh,
Hegelian.
it's thesis, antithesis, synthesis, obviously.
What about
Obvious.
prosthesis?
It's what?
Don't worry about it.
You wouldn't get it.
Is this like a medical field, philosophy? Like what field is this?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
All
thesis,
right,
antithesis, prosthesis.
sounds philosophy.
Prostate.
But it's generally a
you,
German
sorry, go
autism.
ahead. Yeah, it's just German autism. It's just like, everything that exists or could be rational, like, needs to be presented in, like, empirical format, basically.
That's literally the opposite. Like they hate empiricism.
I hate you.
Well,
You
I
got
mean,
that right.
I thought that the rationale behind like Hegel is basically like like reality is being as like expressive in like rational categories. That's like at least what it
Nah,
means to be like Hegelian, no?
What does that mean?
nah. Like,
Okay, but why
Hegel.
should I care about this random dude's philosophy at all?
Oh, do you care
I
about
don't fucking
truth?
know. Just somebody asked.
Find yourself a reason to care, bro.
Find
Do
the
Don't
you
start
what?
care
with
about
that.
truth? Do you have issues like
Yeah,
skepticism?
yes, I care about the truth, but like clearly this guy's ideas weren't popular for a reason, so why should I even
What are
bother?
you talking about?
I
Like they
mean,
weren't popular.
his eyes.
Literally, the world after him is completely shaped by him.
He kind of is
This
popular.
guy
Like
this
his
guy is
ideas
the
are.
reason you have kindergarten. This guy's the reason you have the fucking structure of like higher education. He designed the modern university basically.
Well, he also
He
created
was
rationalism.
highly that's way before
I
fascism.
don't know. I would I mean, I typically attribute it
The
to like
OG fascist was a
Socrates.
Hegelian.
He's part of the reason that we have the United Nations. Woodrow Wilson was obsessed with him. The analytic tradition arises as a disgust with him. The continental tradition also arises as disgust with him. The communists arise as a disgust, yet very strange love with him. And then the fascists thought that they might use him, but then decided ultimately that, nah, they didn't really care. So if you talk about popularity in the sense that it actually matters, the guy's very popular. You don't even so popular you don't even have to know him to believe the shit that he believed, because your world's entirely shaped by him.
Yeah, pretty much. I feel like Hegel was just like religiously motivated though. A lot of shit just kind of sounds like religion.
Well, I mean, all
Well, I don't know.
philosophy is religiously
Like when
motivated.
I'm reading here, his principle, right? The truth is the whole, the rational is the real. Um, I would say there was already an argument made through Christianity for this same sort of idea before his philosophy.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like he's basically just Bible thumper incarnate, and then a bunch of pagan like Germans were like, "Oh, this guy's making sense," but he really just said some shit that Jews were saying for like thousands of fucking years.
Jews were definitely not saying it. Christians, maybe,
Well,
but not the
Jews
Jews.
Hey, yo,
definitely
guys, I
Definitely
existed.
think.
Christians.
Dude,
Hold on,
I'm
hold on,
sorry to
hold
break
on.
it to you,
No,
bro,
no.
but
Jews were
like
saying
the
that too.
Bible and Jews came before the 18th century,
I
before like
don't
Hegel,
think you
bro.
understand
Sorry.
what Hegel says about
The
his views and
Judeo-dialectic.
religion. One, Hegel hated the
Okay.
Jews.
Judeo,
Second,
guys, do you
the
guys love
Christian
Judeo
view.
dialecticism?
Okay,
Nah.
yo, AW, there is some defense that like certain Jews used to interpret like stories like Genesis as not being 100% true, but being
Why is
like
that relevant to what we're talking about? I'm not talking
okay
about
because
Bible exegesis. Like
no, no, because
she,
point being they also used logic to
that
interpret
has
their
nothing to do with what we're talking about.
okay, bringing it back
Okay,
to base.
okay.
Jesus, hold up.
Mhm.
Well, I don't know. I kind of had to explain that part about the Jews because you guys are talking about Christianity and Judaism. But okay, I'll just talk about Christianity. Jesus is the Word of God, which is the Logos, and therefore we got guys like Aquinas with before Hegel using the Socratic method to question every single thing, right? And therefore, what they were using is that they believed the human being was made rational through God, and also given logic, which is Logos, which is Christ, which is the Word, right? So like being logical and seeking the truth is therefore for God. And this is like the beginning of the argument for like science, for example. And I would say that also relates to what you're saying about Hegel. Why like the truth is good, I guess.
Well, I mean that is only like superficially related, though. Like the thing about the Jews, I don't know why that was brought up. Hegel does explicitly say like he's Christian, and he says, "Look, I'm just kind of just explicating rationally certain mysteries in Christianity, like the Trinity and certain other things." Now that's it. So yeah, I mean, so far as you say that, sure, I
Yeah,
can
so
agree with it.
there we go. Like, I did not know he even did that, but it just seems like exactly what you would conclude after knowing that stuff about Christianity and being a Christian. So I guess that's kind of what happened.
Well, the funny thing is, he hated Christianity when he was a teenager and in his early 20s.
Well, I'm sure you would if you're
Typical
like a
German.
rebellious person who's a free thinker, which I mean, which I assume this guy kind of was
Yep.
to end up with these ideas.
I mean, I wasn't trying to like shit on him and say like, oh well, everything this dude said was like basically just Jews like earlier, but like yeah, like a lot of Hegel is just like looking at the Bible and like explaining the Bible.
You say a lot,
Yeah,
but
almost like
he doesn't
if it
really
contains
do
truth.
that.
I mean,
I mean,
okay,
he
like
talks about
for
God a
example,
lot.
like okay, so like
His
for
ideas are
example,
unoriginal.
And he would tell you he would tell you that himself.
whatever.
He's like, I'm not really coming up with something new. Like this is literally the wisdom that people have been carrying for a long time.
Okay,
POV
then yeah,
Vosh.
I mean, he seems to be agreeing with my position on it.
Yeah, so he agrees with all of us when we say that like Hegel wasn't like revolutionary. It's like Nietzsche kind of does the same shit where he's like, I'm not talking about anything like revolutionary, but then like Nietzsche kind of, I don't know. I would say that Nietzsche is far more popular than Hegel.
Well, Nietzsche's not even a philosopher, not proper.
Oh, I think he is, bro.
I think
Well,
anybody
no,
who seeks wisdom is a
because-
philosopher.
Well, no. I mean, he's a philosophical commentator, but he has no system. So, in the proper sense, he's not a philosopher.
Is that when
How
I
can
look
you
up
not define
definition
his
of
ideas?
philosopher, it's going to be like has a system, must have a system?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
if you
that's
want to
what
have an
it is,
objective definition, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Because I thought philosopher was someone that was like engaged or like learning in philosophy, like as an academic.
What if my
discipline.
philosophy was
But
no
okay.
system at all? Then am I not a philosopher?
Then it's not a
I
philosophy.
guess not.
He literally has an
According to
essay
this guy's
about that.
definition, you're not.
No,
Well,
I
it's not
guess
according
I still
to his
am, 'cause it's still a
definition.
philosophy.
So do you think you can love wisdom without actually having any ounce of wisdom? Not a trace?
I mean, if that's all you know, technically that's the best you can achieve. So I guess you still do.
Well, in this case, if you were not wise, well, let's assume that you're the complete opposite. You're a fool.
Yes.
And you believe that you love wisdom. But what you think
Dude,
wisdom
the wise
is...
man knows that he is a fool, bro.
I mean,
Yeah, but
even
in
even
this
a
case-
fool can even a fool given enough time will likely end up at rational conclusions.
You think that? We were
Yeah.
literally talking to a guy earlier who...
Even
I
I
think
mean,
his
I've
entire
seen
life
plenty
will
of
be the same.
fools. If they were that stupid, they would have already killed themselves by
you, like
accident.
one of my mother's favorite quotes is like, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Like
But
even
that's not
mentally
wisdom.
retarded people are able to come to like a conclusion based on pure luck or like whatever have you.
But that's not wisdom. I mean, you see the problem with it?
I didn't say that it was wisdom. I just said
But
that like they're
I was
able
commenting
to.
about wisdom. I know why.
Oh,
what
okay.
is
I know that
relevance
you're
then.
commenting about wisdom. I was commenting on that basically it doesn't have to be wise for someone to come to a wise conclusion. Wow.
No, you do have to be
Ergo,
wise.
you don't have to be a wise
Because
person.
the
to
wise
come to a wise
person is
conclusion.
not just a happenstance.
Literally just
like
be
I
an
was wise
inanimate
one
fucking object.
time. To be wise is to be in a certain consistency. Having a happenstance, accidental
Right. The
convergence of
consistency in
truth.
my explanation was that the clock is right twice a day.
No, the
Did you
clock
listen
isn't
to
right
that,
twice
or-
a day. But it's not right twice a day.
The broken clock.
Yeah, the clock isn't right twice a day.
The broken clock is.
No, it's not right twice a day. The clock isn't doing
Yes, it
anything.
is.
The broken. Okay, like clearly you're not like a philosopher, bro. I don't know what else to say to you.
Yeah, he has
Uh-huh.
no system.
It's like, yes. Yeah, it's over. Dude, you don't have a system, bro. It's over. You're not a philosopher. But I don't know how to, like, do you want me to explain to you, like, word by word, like, why she says, like, a broken clock is right twice a day? Or, like, do you really, like, need me to explain, like, a euphemism because you can't?
No, I know exactly
Okay,
what
so
you're
you get it.
saying,
Okay.
and I'm telling you that it's wrong.
Bro, a
I
12
personally find
hour
this
clock, right?
conversation
A clock with
shallow
12
and
hours on
pedantic.
it. That means it's one part AM, one part PM. Therefore, in one day, which is 24 hours, it strikes the correct number twice.
Right. That's what I was referencing.
Based
because
like,
this
on
man
what?
has never
broader-
seen an OG clock in his life.
Like
This guy's all
literally
digital.
just the broader claim from that is that you don't have to be wise to come to a logical wise conclusion.
No, those things don't logically follow. Because in this case,
Okay.
you have somebody who is a fool, who accidentally stumbles upon a truth, but they don't even know why or how or that this is actually true. They're just a fool, things that are true and false, they can't really tell. You
Yeah,
can't
that
say,
happens
oh,
all
this
the time.
person, you can't say that person is actually like being right because they're not.
Okay, so
It's
if-
like saying
if a
it's like
fool-
saying that
Okay,
it's like
so
saying that you
dude,
have
I
a
just
clock
feel like
that's
you're
broken.
Can I? Okay, I just feel like you're contradicting yourself because in the same breath you say like a fool comes to like a wise or like logical conclusion, which is the analogy that I gave with the broken clock,
I
and then
didn't
you're
say
saying
that.
that well,
I didn't say that.
Okay, hold up. A&W,
Oh my fucking
why was this
god.
argument important again? Because you're
I
trying to
don't.
prove that humans are irrational, or
Because we're
that, like,
trying
what's the
to
point?
prove Hegel's theory of wisdom, bro.
No, I mean, I don't even know why we got on this tangent.
Okay, then it's like useless. I mean, yeah, somebody with a lower fucking IQ might not have enough rationalization to come up with something, but that's obviously not the average human, so you can't use the exception to make the rule.
Ah, yes. Okay, okay. I remember why we got on this tangent. It's that issue. I asked you, like, okay, to be wise, because it's the issue about, like, what is philosophy? And you say, well, philosophy is anybody who's, like, loves wisdom. Well, do you have to be wise to have any, like, in any manner, to any capacity, little or more, to
Look, I
be
think
able to be considered
all
to
it
be
takes to be
searching for
wise is
freedom?
this. I think all it takes to be wise is to do something, think about it, be able to rationalize it, and think about your actions. I mean, that's the bare minimum to be wise.
Literally.
Right. But people rationalize things stupidly all the time, and they rationalize wrong things, even wrongly.
Yes,
So
yeah.
so
Just
set,
the only
rationalizing to
claim that we're
oneself is not enough.
okay, the only claim that we were trying to make is that stupid people can come to rational and wise decisions even without trying to.
Right, but then
That's
that's not
it.
rational or wise.
I'm not saying that the action of them coming to the conclusion is rational or wise. I'm saying that wisdom can be something that somebody discovers over pure luck. It doesn't have to be
Well,
this
then
like
it's not wisdom then, because
Well,
wisdom.
look,
Yeah.
just
I
just
think it
because you
can
make a
be. I think it
conclusion,
can be.
No,
hold up,
because
just because you make a
wisdom is
conclusion,
going to pertain to the agent primarily, not just the action itself as isolated from the agent.
okay, just because you make a conclusion that was incorrect, right? That does not mean that you were not wise.
You can find
What?
something that you can happen to
True.
come across something that is
Okay,
the case, right?
That's also true.
But
if you're
but
looking for wisdom from a person, like, if you're looking for wisdom, period, you would seek someone who's a wise person.
yeah, so anyway, what I was saying is
But
that
okay, hold up. For
wisdom refers
example, hold
to
up. Like
hold up one
Galileo,
second.
like the guys before Galileo, which were the smartest minds, right? They rationalized that the sun was the center of the earth, and you can't say like that. The argument wasn't solid back then because it was, right? They did their research, and they rationalized that that was the case. And they were still wise men. They were the wisest men around, but they just had the wrong conclusion.
Yeah, but so wisdom refers, right, to like having some kind of,
Hello?
you know,
You
to
you cut
like,
out, DM.
oh, I'm cutting out. I'm trying to talk about wisdom as like a qualitative thing that like people have as like agents. Because it relates to what Crow was saying.
So you have the capability of wisdom, but you must actively choose to use it.
Okay, how do I put this in a way that you guys are going to understand? From my point of view, wisdom is only acquired by making foolish choices and then discovering the wise choices. Quite often, for the vast majority of people, they don't make the best choice in the beginning. That's how most people are. And this is
That's
why
how
we
learning
typically
is.
associate. Can I finish? And then you can like rebuttal it. That would be great. And then
No,
like
woman.
I did
typically
not
we
rebuttal.
associate
Yeah, let her finish. Let her finish.
All right.
like I would just say that typically we associate wisdom with people who are older because they've lived a longer life and they're able to reflect on past mistakes that they've made. That is typically what I would consider a wise person. And this is why I said the quote, like the wise person knows that he is only a fool. Because even with wisdom means that you're able to look at past choices and realize that you were foolish about them. Because it requires that sort of perspective.
Wouldn't the wiser guys
The fool
learn from
knows.
other people's
Sorry,
mistakes?
the fool isn't self-aware enough to know that he's making a foolish or wise decision. It just acts. The wise person is self-aware enough to know that he was foolish many times.
But someone can have the capability of wisdom without actively choosing to use it.
Okay, how does that
What?
juxtapose what I said?
Why are we not acting like you can't like
It doesn't
learn from
necessarily. I'm
other
just
people's
adding that
choices?
to the conversation.
Oh, okay. I'm just wondering how that
Your
pertains on what
decision is
to
not
say, what I
informed
said.
by other people's decisions. Is that not wise to learn from other people's mistakes instead of making your own?
I was gonna say, yeah, you can read like
No,
the
I
mistakes
I
of
agree.
others.
Sorry, no, I agree with that. I just mean that most people don't do that.
Well, like the
Well,
fastest way
they're
to
less
Most
learn
people have to
wise.
make
is to make mistakes. It's kind of what she's saying.
The wisest men learn from other people's mistakes instead of making their
They
own.
do, but you realize in life, like there's a lot of skills you can't learn without making a mistake
right.
first. Like if you cook for the first
Exactly.
time, there's no way you're gonna get it right the first time because you read every book. Like stuff still happens.
Even then, like lots of things are, I would say to that, fields that are experimental and require one to make mistakes, such as science, math, that requires trial and error, where quite often you're not going to arrive to the best conclusion first and foremost. These are things that we typically associate with intelligence or like intelligent people because they are difficult problems to solve. And you can't just be like, oh, well, that guy got drunk on Sunday and had a fight with his wife, so I'm just not going to do that. We wouldn't really consider that wisdom. We would just consider that common sense.
I don't see the difference there.
Yeah, I mean, common sense is wisdom to an extent.
Maybe to an extent, but
The wisest philosopher was Wittgenstein.
Who?
Based on what?
He was the most right.
Based on what?
World's smartest mental patient.
Yeah, I mean, based on what?
The only philosopher I follow is Jesus.
Wittgenstein's smartest decision was to hunt down Bertrand Russell. That fucking hot poker.
I agree.
I hate Bertrand Russell.
Yeah, that's why smartest thing Wittgenstein did. The second smartest thing Wittgenstein did was solve math problems while masturbating in World War One. He's a fucking quirky white boy.
yeah, dude, some philosophers were just out of pocket. There was that one, like, fucking Greek one or whatever, who, like, used to masturbate in public and, like, lived, like, homeless, like, vagabond.
You're talking
That
about
dude-
Diogenes.
Yeah, Diogenes was base, though. I kind of like that fucker.
In Herodotus, he got sick, and for treatment, I think he sat in a bathtub full of horse shit and then died.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, but did you hear that Julius Caesar, like, he had a discussion with Julius Caesar, which I kind of forget the exact words that were being exchanged, but it was essentially Julius recognizes Diogenes sitting next to a tree, and they go
Oh god.
up and have a conversation, in which fucking Julius Caesar says that he wants to be Diogenes at the end, and then Diogenes says, well, yeah, well, I would want to be me too.
It was Alexander the Great.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Good.
Julius Caesar was the one that fucked Cleopatra.
I think Caesar would have wanted. Wasn't that Mark Antony? Forget.
Both of them.
Both. They both did. It was
It was
both.
Mark
both-
Antony.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyway, no, I think Caesar probably would have killed Diogenes.
Yeah. They didn't live in the same time.
Caesar Caesar was anti-traditional in a sense, but he was very much like traditional at the same time. He didn't like tradition getting in the way of progress, but he liked tradition being integrated into progress. So he would have seen like Diogenes' behavior as like very like chaotic and disruptive to like the public good.
Okay, yeah,
You
I
think
just
crossing
googled
the
it. She
Rubicon
fucked
might have
both
been a bit
Julius
disruptive to
Caesar
the
and
public
Mark
good?
Antony, bro.
Anyway,
All right, I guessed right.
He like groomed Mark Antony too, because Mark Antony was younger than her
Exactly.
You have
Yeah.
a problem with cougars?
while she was with Caesar.
Yes. Yeah, Cleopatra was a fucking whore, man.
And Mark Antony was Caesar's like adopted son too, on top of that.
Well, what's funny about that dynamic too is she turned Julius Caesar and Mark Antony against each other.
She did? Nah,
Yeah,
it
they
was
ended up like fighting each other.
no, that was Octavian and Mark Antony. Octavian was another one of Caesar's adopted sons.
What the fuck? How many adopted sons did she fuck?
She didn't fuck Octavian.
Or did she not fuck him?
Octavian never went to Egypt. He only went to Egypt to put down Mark Antony and Cleopatra's rebellion after Caesar's death.
I slept with Cleopatra.
Let's go.
No. Look, none of us here are the caliber of man that woman needed.
Octavian like paraded around his like step sibling, which was Caesar and Cleopatra's son. It was in like a triumphant parade through Rome after he defeated Mark Antony.
I do think Cleopatra was decadent historic.
A baddie.
Although I think like I kind of agree with modern historians in that I think she's sort of like portrayed as like the person behind every sort of scheme. Like she's sort of painted as like this woman, you know, who's like behind, you know, every like, you know, man's like downfall that she's like, you know, been related to. And I think that it's kind of like put in a way where it's like people pretend like these guys didn't have their own freedom and their own agency.
Maybe just Mark Antony.
Yeah.
I don't think
It's
Caesar.
over exaggerated, probably.
Caesar already had a wife back
She had
then, too.
Caesar's baby, bro. Yeah, and he cheated on her with fucking Cleo.
I mean, he straight up married both of them. He had like 2 wives, basically.
My God, bro.
I think he
I
like
would've
pulled some
killed
shit
that
by like
bitch.
saying like, "Oh, that's my
So you
Egyptian
guys-
wife."
so we all know that like half of us incarnates to be like anti-god Satanist, and half of us incarnates to be like pro-god. So half of us incarnate good and half incarnate evil, and we don't know who's on whose side. But there has to be like some people who are just watching the TV show. Are those like the alien human hybrids?
Are you talking about half Japanese people, like half us?
No, I'm talking like
people.
the Luciferians.
I would say that does correlate with certain half Japanese people, like Elliot Rogers.
They're just watching the TV show? No, I feel like Elliot
No,
Rogers
they're,
was
like,
on Team Evil. He was part of the
Yeah, he was
spirit that
evil.
that negates and yet eternally works good.
The Supreme Gentleman.
I know what you're referencing.
Yeah. There's
The
like,
other-
there's like this crackpot theory that like the reason Elliot Rogers was bad was because his dad was white and his mom was Asian. On the inverse. of
I
that
just don't
dynamic.
think about the psychological profile of people who murder multiple women because they're just not stable. I don't relate to that.
No, I'm not saying I do.
I didn't say you do either.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll say
I'm just saying I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in finding out who how this game of souls works.
Hmm.
Because I'm pretty sure I'm the alien-human hybrid thing. Pretty sure.
What are people in the call interested in?
That's what I'm trying to bring up. I'm trying to bring up an interesting topic.
Nowadays,
to
we
be a
just call like
furry.
alien-human hybrids like reptile people, and they usually have autism.
They're not reptiles. Well, like, okay, you know how there used to be more retarded people? Like,
That
I
was just
remember
a
in, like,
joke.
the 2000s.
That was just a joke.
You remember, like, in the 2000s, like, there were clearly more mentally disabled, like, retarded people, like, hello, you know, that sort of thing. They're gone now. You don't see them. I think that was, like, attempted engineering that failed. Those were attempted hybrids that failed, and, like, they got better. They're like me now.
I think normal people never existed historically.
So Hegel, go back to Hegel.
Yeah, before this devolves into pure schizo posting, maybe
Can we
should-
talk about Hegel's theory of normies?
Is it theory about normies?
Do you
You
guys
should be
think
one.
that there's like an objective morality?
Ooh, here, that's a good.
Yep.
No.
That's a terrible question.
Why is that a terrible question? That's an amazing
Am I
question.
allowed to say kill yourself?
No, doesn't that presuppose objectivity
No,
and subjectivity?
Yeah, it presupposes objectivity and subjectivity. What of it?
This is bad. We shouldn't suppose objectivity and subjectivity.
Why not? Ayn Rand told me so.
Welcome to philosophy BC, dude.
No, Ayn Rand is like, oh god.
All right, we're
I
not
had
going to
an
go
English
into
teacher
Ayn
who would,
Rand.
like, mentally
We're not.
abuse me.
We are not going to go into this. Somebody actually asked an interesting question. Do you have any thoughts on that?
How do you think Jesus would treat modern day transgender people?
He would be able to. He would be able to
he'd
tell
try.
us
Considering
what is
Jesus
going
hung
on.
around. Okay.
He'd try and help them.
Considering Jesus.
Because he always helps people.
How would he help them?
Well,
Well,
one
sure,
thing he
dude,
could
he
explain
turned
what it
like
actually
fucking-
is.
Way.
I think he would
Bro.
give them a volume of Atlas Shrugged.
Oh god.
Because he helps the blind and the deaf and, like, you know, cripples and everything.
I mean, Jesus always fucking helps people who like are the most fucked up.
I don't
Yeah, but,
know.
like,
You
what
remember
would
that
help
old
them look
man
That
that
dude
came
hung
to
out
him?
with like prostitutes,
Because, like, Jesus
fucking
never
greedy
went.
politicians, like the
If you
shitty
look at the
scum of the
life
earth
of Jesus, right? He
people.
always helps the weaklings.
What?
He never helps like the.
Well, I didn't
strong
hear what
people, he always
Ironic
helps, like,
said.
the weak people.
Can we just?
I was just
Okay.
like, how would he help them though? Like, would he make them not trans? Like, would he make their body match their mind, or would he just make them like stop wanting to be trans?
He'd probably explain what the problem is.
I don't fucking know.
Yeah, he would explain.
He'd probably just make them be.
He'd explain the problems to them.
Okay.
Because
Well,
there's
the
a
something's
reason
going
they
on.
are like that. There's a reason they think
Yeah,
like
dude,
that.
this shit is going fucking nowhere.
So
Yeah, informant can think at the rate of like 2 words per hour, and he's trying to speak at 4 words per hour. It just doesn't work. But
thanks. I appreciate
Dude,
the
I
love.
swear to God, I'm like the first person to answer, and then 2 other people start talking as I'm like answering. I swear to fuck.
Yeah, it's really annoying.
Thanks for the compassion.
Life of a woman. Am I right?
anyway,
For
well,
real though.
Jesus,
Fuck this
Jesus wouldn't
shit.
say that, man.
Faggot.
Yeah,
You're
dude,
right.
honestly, yo, God, help a trans woman out, dude. These men are interrupting me, bro. Like, I'm gonna need to have a penis. Let me
Bunny,
just
you're not
borrow
trans.
one for like a 30-minute convo.
Okay.
I'm finna have to be
we
trans.
can
if I get
hinge the objective
interrupted
morality to the
it's
Jesus
gonna
and
have to
transedness thing.
happen.
Because presumably, if Jesus is a perfect being and knows how to perfectly will the good, intersubjectively with other people, which means not necessarily forcing people to be something, but being able to guide them in the most apt manner, he would be able to do that. So it's like, can we apply like practical philosophy to trans people? My problem is not sure what to think about this.
Yeah, me neither. I'm not sure.
That's rough.
I don't know how Jesus would help them.
Oh, sure.
Well,
Yeah,
can
that's
we
the
apply
problem. We're not
practical
quite
philosophy to
Jesus.
Jesus.
Yo, big up Jesus.
Depends what you think Jesus is.
Well, hold on, everybody.
Big ups to Jesus, though.
In the Bible, Jesus says, "The truth is not for all men, but only for those who seek it." Wait, no, that was Ayn Rand. My bad.
No, Jesus also said it. It's in, what is it? Is it Mark? Where he's talking to them about like why he teaches parables to some, and then he teaches the apostles different things. And he tells them, look, the parables are for those who can understand, they'll understand. For those who can't, they're fucked. They're not meant to understand. And then he goes and directly talks to the Pharisees, and he says, you guys, I'm telling you the truth, but you can't hear it. You have ears, but you don't hear. And he's like, that's not my problem.
Okay, so like the argument for like why Jesus didn't just like prove that he's the Son of God is like that you have to have faith, right? But like why did he just like continuously have to like tease that he can perform miracles like just in really specific cases? Like he just like had to like make wine at a wedding. Like why did he even do that if he couldn't just like, or if he was trying to just get us to believe, you know?
It's for the dummies in the room.
What's a wedding without booze?
He turned the wine in. He turned the water into wine because his
Yeah,
mother
and
asked him
his
to.
mother asked me. It was a personal favor.
Well, I guess the Bible's true.
I mean, of course, like if you define the Bible as true, how could you argue with that?
I think a discussion about objective morality.
I think a discussion requires you to fix that fucking mic and get a new mic, son.
Well, I'm a listener. I'm not a speaker.
Yeah, I don't know how the conversation shifted to Jesus so quickly.
If the conversation keeps not being a discussion.
Anyway, if I'm in the wrong, then I apologize, informant. But I like my whole thing was, I felt like whatever, fuck it. Ugh, fuck it. But if we want to get back, because it's kind of was both tangential, like the objective morality and the trans thing. It's like, I think the problem is we don't know necessarily why some people are trans right now. It's like, is there a purpose that is by spirits?
I mean, does it really matter why people are trans? Like,
As in,
can't we say
yeah.
either way if it's like a good or bad thing just based on the outcomes and like the societal repercussions of transgenderism?
That's ignoring the essence.
What's the essence then?
Why people are trans.
Which we don't know.
Why do you guys think that? Why do you think people are trans? What are some theories?
Message being pushed.
Okay, like Nat.
Desire for undeserved attention also ranks pretty highly in the reasoning.
I think
that's something that you could only say
question.
about prior
I think
stuff. Well, hold on. Let me finish my point.
I think it's a spiritual.
Hold on, man. Hey, yo, I was talking. Just let me finish my point. Then you can talk. Just real quick. For the person who said like, "Oh, it's just seeking attention." Well, that's not the case originally. I will agree with you that now it's become a kind of a social thing, and there are certainly some not unsignificant number of people who are doing it for attention. But when this phenomenon first appeared, it was not something for attention. So you can't explain that original appearance as having to do with it.
No, but I mean, I would agree that it's either a significant minority or even possibly a majority of people now that's like the desire for the identity is a massive component of the reasoning as to why they do it.
Right. But excluding that group, for the people who genuinely have this phenomenon, we still don't really know how it happens. It makes no sense. The whole thing, like, oh, well, I have a female brain or a male brain. Well, what the hell does that have to do with liking dresses and putting makeup on and anything? Because there's nothing essentially because those things are cultural things. There's nothing essential about being a female that leads you to those things.
It's really crazy how like the narrative shifted from like, okay, boys and girls can just like whatever they want and that's okay. And like that was really progressive, but now it's like if you like feminine things, then you must actually be a woman trapped in a man's body. Like it just did a complete 180,
it's
right?
really not dialectical at all.
I mean, I think like if you look at any,
I don't know.
If you look at like a distribution of like, people, if you look at the distribution of like the psychological temperamental distributions, like the big five, I mean, like most women are going to be more agreeable than the average man. And so if you have like a high agreeableness man who's interested more in people than in things, which is, typically a feminine trait, then when difference between things and or different or being more interested in people or things is the main difference that psychometricians have found between the average man and woman. Women are more interested in people and men are more interested in things. So if you have like a man that's like very on the very feminine side, high in neuroticism, high in or high in agreeableness and high in neuroticism would be the most feminine temperamental traits on the big five. Then you start to get into the realm of like being very inclined towards feminine things, and that where does that cross into someone actually being a woman, or like, and I don't know, like my personal belief is that the categorization of categorizing people as biological male and female is the least confusing way to categorize people when it comes to gender or sex. And so by reducing confusion, you give people less anxiety and less likelihood to kind of wander into, nihilism. And I think that's helpful. Like it reduces the amount of variability.
Anyways, informant, you were trying to say something earlier. Sorry, we cut you off. Do you want to add to that?
No, the lady asks like, why does it happen? Like, what's the issue with transgenders? Like, why does it happen? What's the cause of it? And I just said, I think it's a spiritual problem. If you look at it, people always think about the societal impact it has, but I think it's more important to look at the personal impact it has, like on the person's family and loved ones. There's
Yeah,
a
but what
lot
about the
of
person themselves?
sadness. Yeah, the person themselves. But like, let's say you take a guy and he wants to be a transgender, so he becomes a girl. Like, he, in most cases, 90% of cases, he breaks the bond that he had with his father.
Like he
I
had one.
think less so with the mother.
If he had one, he wouldn't have become
But that's
trans.
Yeah, that doesn't really make sense. I mean, if
I
you have
mean,
a loving family,
I don't-
and if your
that's not
family
for me,
disowns
it's
you
just
because of some change in sex, well, not change sex because you can't change sex, but
Yeah, that's what I
some
thought.
change of thing.
I think that's more important.
Like if a family disowns you for that, your family's fucked up. Just gonna say it.
Well,
Like
I think
that's not a
it's
you
flexible
problem.
as to the parameters
Traditional
that are
families
not
will disown you for that.
Oh
for
yes, they
why
do. They
I'm
will. And
saying
traditional families, I would say, are fucked up in many ways.
just for
Gen
Why
Z,
would you
Gen
make
Z
that
women are
out of a
becoming
claim?
trans because they can't work, they don't eat hot chip, and they don't lie, so they're obviously men.
Okay, but anyway, I want to talk to AW. You said like the family's messed up, right? If they disown the person. But like
Right.
if you look at it, what does it mean when they disown the child for being transgender? It means that this family, right, a long time ago, they said we will measure ourselves by a certain amount of standards. And in most cases, I'll take an example. The standard is the Bible, right? The whole family, the dad, the mom, the grandparents, all of them have said the standards for our family will be the Bible. And right, if you say it's messed up for them kicking out the child, you're saying that they should give the child preferential treatment. But it's not good
Well, yeah.
because they themselves adhere to those standards, right? They themselves adhere
Well,
to
yeah.
those
The
standards in
standards
their
are
own
stupid.
personal capacity.
Yeah. The standard is
Well, wait,
stupid.
Yeah,
no,
but
that's
see, that's
ridiculous,
just your
AW. They're not
that's just an
stupid,
opinion.
but
That's
That's
just
not an
your opinion
opinion.
about
Well,
that.
okay, sure. In this
It is.
discussion, from the standpoint in which like we're presenting things, this all appears as opinion. But I have very particular reasons, which I would dare say are absolute, which don't make this a mere opinion. I am willing to say and bite the bullet
All
that
I'm saying is,
standard orthodox
all I'm
beliefs that people
saying is,
had in traditional families are stupid. You know, if you're a
all I'm
parent
saying
and
is,
you know
look
you
at
spoken
disown,
like an
you
idiot
eject
who's never even
somebody.
looked into them. I mean, like, he's probably like 22 years old and hasn't done shit with his life. Like, shut up, dude.
Oh yes, because you
you
sound
don't
so
have to insult
wise.
it. Like
You
it's not
sound
gonna
so
be true.
wise, man.
What's the
AW,
point
don't
of
beliefs and
insulting
standards and
someone?
roles arise because of certain
Man, it's
conditions and
thousands of
their
years of tradition. Like, you don't just call that
Oh,
stupid and throw it
thousands
away.
of years of tradition. People
nah.
believed the stupid shit for thousands of years. What the fuck do I care?
Okay, dude. Give it a few years, you'll see.
Oh,
As
you give it
far
a
as
few
the
years. I'll give you another 40. You'll probably weigh what, 70, maybe 80, so assuming that you're older. Maybe you're younger than me. You won't get to my
younger.
level.
I mean, for thousands
Um,
of years, people lived in like communes where
No
female
one needs
fertility
to
and
be on
ability to
your level.
reproduce was like celebrated. Like the
Everyone's
current gender
unique in
roles
their own
didn't
way.
aren't like universal.
Hey, informant. So, like, your point on the family has selected the Bible or the Quran or some traditional text as the basis for their morality, and that's somehow justifying their ostracizing of a person because they violated that. Um, I kind of get where you're coming from with it, but I'd wonder if you would consider that the family needs to allow members of the family to select maybe to make an individual choice as to what they draw their morality from, right? So like if I was part of a traditional family and I was quite convinced that an atheistic or some other moral standard that would allow transgenderness is what I want to select, then do you not believe that there would be some individual like the family should respect my individual choice in any way?
He thinks
That's
he's
a
gonna
tough
die out.
question, because
What do you mean it's a tough question,
uh,
dog? We ain't gonna be dead. We taught our children right. Look, I don't hate you
but
gays,
anyway,
but
I
God,
think he asked
no.
me the question, so
Yeah, I
I'll
asked him
answer.
the question,
And
dude. Please.
yeah, so that's a tough question because I say it's a tough question because some people, like I said, they make the Bible the standard for the whole family, right? Some people do that because of a feel out of tradition. But for me, for example, use myself as an example, I do it because I believe it's the truth, right? And nothing but the truth.
Sure.
So now you're asking me, I have a child, he wants to be transgender. Should I let him choose his own thing? I am convinced that if he steers away from this measurement, which is the Bible, I believe with everything that I am that he will go to hell, right? And I love my child. I want him to go to heaven. So it's difficult,
Don't
in that
He's an
context.
embarrassment.
If
No, no,
someone
no. Be honest.
really believes
Be
that,
honest. He's
I would
an
say no,
embarrassment.
because the alternative is death, and you don't want that.
Well,
No, no,
So,
no.
that's your
but
belief.
you look at
No,
from a
that's too
perspective
far.
of, yeah, but you look at
No,
from a
dude, you're a
perspective of
failure as
you
a
don't know
father,
what's the
dude.
ultimate
Like, look,
truth.
if my
But
son
there's
is
people
gay, I
like
don't
me out
care.
there that's like the
I'm an
Bible is the
actual
ultimate
parent.
truth, and if you
There's,
just go
don't
against it,
interrupt
even
me.
like 1%, you'll die in hell. You don't want that for your child.
Yeah, but
I
do you
don't
think
want
the
to be
best way to
sensitive
convince him
person
to
today.
not go that route is to ostracize him and abandon him completely?
Okay, see that's a very good question. But now we gotta talk
That's
about the
cool. That's my
nuances, right? If
son,
my
dog. I
son
got a
comes to
son
me and
and a
says, "Hey,
daughter.
Dad,
I
I'm a
don't care if
transgender.
they're
I
gay or
feel this
straight
way."
or whatever.
It's not
I want
like
them
I
to
just
be
kick him out. We're
happy.
gonna have a conversation, you know.
No, we're
I'm
trying
gonna
to
tell him,
talk
You
here,
listen,
dude.
want
look,
the
Just
you,
don't
same,
butt
dog.
in like that,
I
dude.
got children.
Please.
You won't.
is it
No,
is it the
dude.
Nihil guy?
That's my
I
son.
muted him.
Hey,
You can
Neil,
hey,
talk.
just
hey,
go
hey,
after
hey.
him, dude. I'm
So we're
asking
All
you a
gonna
right.
question.
All
Please.
right, I sort of muted him. Neil, just like hold on, man. Just hold your horses. We'll let you talk once he's made his point.
all right. So we gotta talk about the nuances. If my son comes to me and says, "Hey, Dad, you know, I'm transgender or I'm gay or whatever," I tell him, "Okay, let's have a conversation about it. Tell me how you feel. Tell me what's the thoughts going in your mind. Be transparent with me, right? It's not just immediately kick out because I love my son. I want to do everything I can for him, right? You do it out of love,
But
and
you
you know,
think
then we
kicking
look
him
at the
out would be
Bible.
the? Do you think that kicking him out would be
No,
an eventual step?
I'm getting to that.
Jesus Christ.
If
Hurry up.
if he like if we really have a deep transparent discussion, he tells me everything that's going on with him, what he feels, what he thinks, how his perception
Oh,
of
okay, we
events
get it.
that's
We get it,
occurred,
man. Just
because
get to the
obviously
point.
something happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get it. Just get to the point.
Okay, the point is, if he so then we talk about the Bible, right? And we find the answers there because that's what the Bible's for.
Okay, hold on.
The
We get it.
answers
Like,
are there.
the
And
question was,
we
assuming that
pray.
you're not going to come. Hold on. Assuming that you're not going to come to agreement because they're not going to accept the Bible, or is one of the answers going to be to kick them out? Do you think that's going to be the best thing you can do for your kid?
Okay. In that regard, like if he persists and he doesn't want to, then you know, ultimately, I love my child, but I am commanded to love God
Dude,
more.
fuck her.
That's you know, like the Bible says, if you love your child or your mother or your parents more than you love Jesus, you won't be saved. So and also I can't. If I permit him, if I say my son, okay, I love you so much, you know, it's fine. I'm not gonna kick you out. I'm not gonna disown you, right? Then I am sinning against God.
Do you think
Then I
God is
am
so
telling to
petty as to
God,
give a care about
this
stupid shit like this?
Where does
You're
it?
gonna get
Where is the?
hey, hey, hey,
Where does
it's
the
not
Joaquin,
scripture
hey,
say you
you
have to
said I
do
it's
get
that?
not
to talk
stupid
after
for
this.
God.
You said I get to talk after this.
All
You're
right,
gonna
yeah,
get
yeah,
your
go
Yes.
ahead.
son raped.
I have to do
You're gonna
what?
get hey,
All right,
Kind
hey,
of
get
all
your
right.
son
question.
Let
raped.
Neil talk. Let
You
Neil
know that,
talk.
right? You're gonna make your boy raped. You're gonna get him vulnerable. You're gonna make him in a bad
It's not
situation,
stupid
especially
though.
if he's sweet.
You're saying that it might make the situation quite a bit worse by kicking him out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I don't know. Like, where is the injunction in the Bible, informant, to ostracize someone who is, um, behaving? I guess, or to like. There's a difference between ostracizing, like not moving in the same social circles as someone, and disowning them, right? So I mean, I don't. What parts of the Bible are you drawing from, and when you make that eventual decision?
Okay. So the part that I think of currently is in the Old Testament. There's a thing if the son curses at the mother or the father, you have to take him out and you have to like
We have a new
stone him
covenant.
to
You know
death.
that, right?
So, are you
Yeah,
Judeo-Christian or
but
are
I
you
wouldn't kill
Christian?
my son.
You would
Oh,
kill your
it says
son.
to kill him
I don't know the
if he
difference.
swears at his mother.
Yeah, but I do specify I wouldn't kill my son. Yeah, I
So you
wouldn't.
take the Bible at its
But
word when it's convenient to you, and not when you don't like it.
Um,
because I have love in my heart, and my son is persisting to be
And
gay, right?
so
But
love
until the day
justifies
on my
you cherry
deathbed,
picking
let
what
me
you
answer
take from
your
the
question.
Bible.
Until the day of my deathbed, I will pray that he finds
I
the
did not ask you
light
about
and
that.
the
I did
truth,
not
and
ask you
that
about
he,
that. I did not
you
ask
know,
you about that.
he
I did not
confesses
ask you
his sins
about
and
that.
turns
I
back
did
to
not
Christ.
ask you
So
about that. I did not
if you
ask you
really love
about that.
someone, you're not just gonna kill him.
You're not going to keep talking without answering what I asked you. I did not ask you about that. Can you answer what I asked you about picking how you pick to follow certain things and to qualify them at your whim? Because it seems to me you said that the passage you quoted, or the one you're referring to, says that you ought to kill a child who's disrespectful to the parents. And you said, well, I wouldn't, based on what? And your answer to that is what? You say that you're just following the Bible, but apparently you don't. because you're cherry picking
No,
when it goes. What do
this
you
is a
think?
misunderstanding of the way the Bible is typically interpreted by modern day
No,
Christians. Like
let
there
him
are
answer.
passages in the
No,
Old
no, no,
Testament
no. Don't cut him off.
that
Can
Let him
can I
You
that
ask
should
you
don't
let
a
him talk for
question?
map
himself.
one to one. No, excuse me.
I'll
You
There are
should
ask
let
you
him.
a
plenty
You
of
should
question.
let
passages.
him
You're
talk for
cutting
himself.
him off.
There, just to be clear, there are
I'll answer
passages in
your
the Old
question.
Testament that aren't viewed as general commands anymore.
Let him answer the
You're
question.
cutting him off.
Excuse me. Let him speak for
In the
himself.
New Testament, so in the New Testament, Jesus says the new covenant is one of love, love one another. So you take that, that's the answer I have for you. And then secondly, the Bible says go stone your child, but no one ever did that. No
Yes,
one
they
ever did
did.
that.
Yes, they did.
Well, but
It's
the
never been
New
recorded.
Testament
You want,
supersedes the Old.
it was the law,
That's the
but no
point.
one did it.
So then why? So if the New
I
Testament
follow
supersedes
both.
the Old, I don't get why he's referring to the Old Testament
They're
stuff.
talking about war and this
No,
shit.
it
Oh,
doesn't supersede, it
I'm sorry. I got a
fulfills it.
Bible. Hey, I got a
There's a
Bible right
difference.
next to
It
me, but
fulfills
it's
it.
like, dude, I know my Bible. I grew up in the
Jesus,
Lutheran
when
church.
Jesus was
I
hung on
went
the
to
cross, before he was hung on the cross, he was stoned. The passage in the Old Testament says, take him outside of the city
I
gates
got
and
ours. I
stone him.
mean, bro, I grew up
Jesus
in
was
this shit,
stoned
bro.
outside the city gates.
Yeah.
He brought everything,
No,
all
he
the
got
things that
murdered.
people were
Neil,
supposed to
please
do
stop. Shut
and
up.
didn't do. He
Why
went
shut
through
up?
that,
Because
right?
another
So it's in
person is talking.
fulfillment.
He keeps over
I no
talking
longer
everyone
have
else.
to stone my child. Now I have to.
If they
Yes,
turn the
that's
other
law. He
cheek,
can't
I
be
hit
gay,
back.
and I have to push him out. But do it out
Nigga,
of
you
love.
are
Even
gay.
if I
So
ostracize and disown my child.
Okay, informant. Like you're droning on and on. We get it. Like I was just asking some question about how do you determine that you're referring to these things in the Old Testament and you're qualifying them, but the qualification is you say, okay, Jesus is the fulfillment of the Old Testament. Then why are you referring to the Old Testament? You know, Jesus said what? There's only really two commandments: love God and love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
And from that, you are making your own projections, which are not biblical, about what this means. And you're deciding, oh, well, I think this passage in the Old Testament is relevant, but only to this extent that I decide to, because I interpret love in such a way, and and some other person goes and interprets it in such and such another way. So there's no consistency here that I'm seeing. It seems to me you're just cherry picking what you want to believe, and you're projecting
Yeah,
what you
and
want to
even like,
believe.
No, AW, like,
even,
just to be clear,
I grew up
you
in
want
a
him to
very
respond?
traditional family, and even then, like when I hear you guys over
Can
talking
I
to each other, it's
respond?
weird to me. See, you do the same shit because you got babied as a child.
You want me to
Look,
respond?
All right,
you don't
and
disrespect.
Neil, I'm muting you for a second to just let him respond. So, informant, go ahead.
Firstly, I want to say, please don't just mute me mid conversation.
I,
Just say,
I,
hey,
I
I'm cool. You
will
know,
because I keep
chillax.
you don't respond immediately. I had to go tell you like 6 times last time that you weren't responding to my
Because there's
question.
a bit of a lag. But I don't want to talk to you from like cut off mid sentence. Like it's not nice. No one wants
Well,
to go
it's
through
not
that.
nice for you to
So you
waste
have to
our
make a
time
decision
either.
if you want to continue talking to me.
Well, yes, it's
Okay,
not
it's fine.
nice that you don't
Never
respond
mind,
to
I
the
won't
things
waste
that you're
this time
directly
anymore.
asked.
Yeah, it's fine. Never mind.
Maybe it's
Bye
a
bye.
technical problem, but anyway.
I tell him it's a technical problem, but he refuses.
No,
It's not a technical
it's
problem.
it may be a technical
Guys,
problem, but it's not. I don't want
this
to get on this tangent.
informant, just answer the question. Let's just keep the conversation going, and just try to keep your answers a bit more brief than they have been.
Oh, he left.
All right.
Oh,
Yeah, your reference to Jesus saying there are only two commandments: love your neighbor and God. Like love is misinterpreted by a lot of people to mean just have compassion or like just agree
dog,
with
Jesus helped out
people. Like
prostitutes. Dog.
love.
Come on, dude, you know better. Even
Excuse
think
me.
about Job. This
Well,
whole
hold on.
family
Let him
got
finish his
murdered.
point. Neho, let him finish his point.
If you're fundamentally incapable of having a civilized conversation, dude, like please work on that. So again, the point I'm trying to make is that love can be very judgmental in that it's desiring the best in the person and trying to bring that about in any way possible, right? And so to say that love is just acceptance, that's a very modern reduction of what love actually is,
No, I
and
agree.
it's put forward by the type of idiots that believe that if you ever
It
judge
is.
anyone
That's
for
weird.
anything, you're being an ass. It's like, no, dude,
Correct
like we have
yourself.
to have
Hey, correct
standards.
yourself.
We all judge
Ass,
pedophiles.
idiot.
Like,
Yeah. No, yeah, I get what you're
so
saying, and I actually agree with you very much. The thing is, unless somebody can give a good account about the basis of where they are determining what is good and what is bad, all of this ends up being vagaries of one's opinions and feelings and, loosely interpreted and codified historical traditions. Now, what I said earlier about tradition, because I did say something against tradition. The problem with tradition is not that they're like, because it's tradition, it's old, it's no good. No, that's not the problem. The problem is that there's a lot of shit in tradition, despite it being true, is unjustified. We're at a standpoint today in history where even the common fool needs some level of intelligible justification beyond, well, we've always done it that way, and the book says so.
Okay, well, I would argue that the 20th century was an exploration of completely rational morality, where
I
we
would say
tried
the
to do
opposite.
away with. Okay, well, for instance, I mean, the Nazis did draw from Catholicism and some themes there. The
They had
communists
an
completely.
ontological, like the Nazis had literally a metaphysical, ontological, religious grounding for their fucked up morality.
Yeah, but to say that it aligned, say that claims of racial superiority and Nordic, and return to like a Nordic desire, heroism as like the ultimate virtue is like that doesn't really align whatsoever with the core fundamental themes of Christianity,
No,
right?
certainly
And in the
not. The
same
Nazis
way,
hated Christianity.
all right, and in the same way, communism, basically eradicated any religious belief by fiat. So, these were systems that were largely, or at least communism was largely built on a completely rationalistic, anti-traditional, destroy all history kind of place, and we saw how that turned out. So, because the
Not
world is
really.
very difficult to navigate, you have to. It's easier to draw. Well, okay, I'll shut up.
Well, no, I would disagree with that. Like, communism also was based on a metaphysical ontology, particularly the ontology of the human being as a laboring being.
But it was a-traditional, right?
Yeah, it was certainly not traditional, and that's because they thought that in tradition, they thought the tradition was guided by some principle of this, which is the whole thing about historical materialism, about the development of societies being some kind of like objective, practical mediation of how labor like works itself out and how human essence as social works itself out due to general ignorance at the beginning of history. And as you get more and more complex, there's more and more understanding, more and more self-control, more and more mechanization and objectification of labor and machines and a growth of freedom and the possibility of free human essence. So this wasn't merely a rationalist thing. This too has its own basis in mysticism. It's hard to disconnect the roots of Marxism from actually even the roots of Christianity.
Well, no. Where are the mystical origins of communism or Marxism?
At least with Marx. Marx is
Millenarianism.
Marx is a millenarian, despite the fact that he doesn't claim to be, but he is. Totally follows the whole idea of millenarianism. This whole idea that we're going to make heaven on earth, we're going to fix everything. Marx didn't claim anything insight from God, but if you read a bunch of mystics and you read Marx, you're like, yeah, they're talking about the same fucking shit. His view of the human being as a laboring being, his view of like the human being as being essentially harmonious and not contradictory. Like his whole thing against Hegel was he didn't think that contradiction was a true thing, that it was only something that arose and to its extreme in capitalism and communism. We're all going to be just like the lion sleeping with the lamb kind of deal.
Okay. Would you say that it was a complete departure from like the Mesopotamian, Egyptian, Jewish, and eventual Christian tradition?
No, I would not, because I think it's actually grounded in it, and it's literally a secular extension of it.
Okay, tell me how materialism is in any way compatible, with Christianity.
It isn't, and Marx isn't a materialist in a metaphysical sense.
Okay, didn't he boil down all the basis of all human interaction to economics?
Yes, but economics has nothing to do with a substance called matter.
Okay.
Yeah, Marx never said, I'm a materialist because I believe everything is made of matter. That's not what he meant by the term.
And the basis of economics is not the doctrines of the markets. The basis of economics for Marx is actually a manifestation of the ontology of the human being as a social laboring being.
That's a fundamental claim as to the nature of human beings, right?
Yeah.
All right. So I guess that certainly wouldn't be like Christianity, I guess, would draw more on moral, like a moral definition of human nature, drawing like going back to, being made in the image of God, so the axiomatic belief in the value of human beings, the belief that every human being is responsible for their own personal behavior, that human beings have the capacity to be good or evil. There's some free will in there. I don't see these claims really echoed much by Marx.
No, because he doesn't care. I mean, Marx generally just avoids metaphysics altogether. Like the most that he ever did was talking about human ontology in the 1844 manuscripts. After that, like he never talks about it again, despite the fact that it's all based on the human ontology.
Hey, I'm not trying to be rude to you. You broke your own rule. You say he was over talking and being like boring.
No one can just talk
Why
to
did you
shut up.
interrupt him with your meta critique? I was actually interested in listening to that, Nihil.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know. Look at this.
my boy.
No,
Yeah,
just mute yourself.
okay. Yeah, sorry, Nihil. Like you're gonna remain muted. You have nothing to add that's worthwhileness.
Yeah. So I guess there's no room for God in the Marxist position. There's no room for
well, no room for the Christian God.
Well, what God would there be room for?
Marx is actually pretty amenable with pantheism.
Pantheism, meaning like the worship of spirits of human, like what do you mean by pantheism?
Not even the worship, just the veneration of nature, the world of existence, the domain of reality.
Okay.
I
guess that would be more. That would be more Eastern philosophy.
Yeah, well, it's actually more Jewish, strangely enough. Like there's a guy, his name is Enrique Dussel, Mexican Marxist, but he writes specifically on this, and he's very. I didn't think about this for forever, and he's very persuasive in what he says. That Marx, despite how much he claims to hate religion, he really only hates a certain kind of religion, and he has a very religious demeanor to everything he wrote and did. And like he used religious language a lot.
Sure. Like religious demeanor doesn't certainly that would be a departure from the orthodoxy of Russia, right? Or the religious traditions of the areas that Marx trafficked in, England, Germany, Switzerland, etc. Right? So I mean, like just because you allow for some traditions or some metaphysics in your ideology doesn't mean that the communists literally went around destroying any historical artifacts. This was Mao's, Cultural Revolution, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was certainly a rejection of the tradition that had got the Russians and the Europeans to their position, and we saw what kind of transpired in light of that. People were completely ungrounded and unfettered from what they believed, so they would believe anything really, and the whole society kind of turned into a lying tyranny. And so that is
I'm not going to deny that.
Right. So that is I would say that's the fundamental danger of rejecting one's traditions. It's like you have to figure out the entire world and you have to get it all right or you're fucked, basically.
Yeah, but who gave us that result? The Christians.
What do you mean?
That literally is a result of the drive of Christianity. Christianity gave us the modern world of individuality. Christianity gave us the modern world of scientific rationality, and Christianity gave us secularism. It came out of that tradition, and to deny the historical reality that it did come out of that tradition, not only historically, it didn't just happen to happen, and that it couldn't have happened, it necessarily had to happen. It is the drive of Christianity to try to know God. And when you take that seriously, you go in very strange directions that are not apparent from the
What was it?
beginning.
What's the drive again? Sorry.
The drive to know
The drive
God.
of Christianity? To know God.
Yeah.
Like no K no or N-O?
Yeah. Kano. And
Okay,
no
the
in
drive.
the GN also gnosis as well. Because in Christianity, part of the doctrines is that, it is your duty to know. You can't just say, well, I believe in Jesus. Well, you ought to know what you believe in. You have to. How are you going to go to the world and preach if you don't know what you believe in?
How does this relate to the conversation? I'm confused.
That this drive, when taken seriously, of course, the common person doesn't get into theology and doesn't get into science and whatnot. But the people who really get into this stuff, the monks and the theologians, they do take it seriously. They're the ones who took it to the limit.
Right, and I don't see how that has been a cost to humanity. I think that's been a great service. Like,
yeah, and I'm not saying that it's not. I'm saying that's good, but I'm saying that same drive is exactly what led to the things that you're decrying as being against the tradition. Well, from tradition,
okay. Like secular, yeah, I understand how the rationalist mind destroyed our ability to believe in a literal God. But that's certainly the Nietzschean argument that the European mind was focused through a single prism of a belief in everything emanating from God to the point where it was disciplined enough to start questioning its own beliefs. Like I would fully subscribe to that. So yeah, secularism largely did arise from Christianity. That being said, rationalism and secularism is a thin coat of paint on arguably millions of years of human existence, right? Or at least 500,000 years of human existence. So there's a lot encoded in the oral and written traditions that, when passed down, really eliminates a lot of room. It gives you a lot of guidance in terms of how to live your life, regardless of if you believe there's an actual sky god or not. You see what I'm saying? So
no, yeah, I'm not going to deny that.
To call that stupid, or to disregard, I won't hold you to having called it stupid. I know that was probably a casual comment, but to to throw that out leaves people in a sea of unknowns that I don't think the average person, I don't even think the top 1% of people are equipped to navigate.
Sure. And empirically, I would say that is true. Most people are actually harmed by access to a knowledge which they cannot comprehend, but which they can grasp just enough to get a little thread of doubt, which leads to an endless doubt for them. It has harmed them more than it has helped them on the individual momentary level in which we live in history right now.
Yeah, but, like the nihilistic, or the wave of nihilism that's sweeping like a lot of young people, right? I mean,
right.
It's very difficult to look at that and think rationalism is a net benefit to most people.
But also, it's the case that, well, the traditional stuff has fallen away. Why? Because it can't justify itself. And we live in a time in which people just don't take it for given anymore.
Well, that's only because, first of all, there's a fundamentalist set of dogmatic morons in the Islamic tradition and mostly the American Christian tradition that insist in the literal interpretation of everything that was not, that wasn't really, I don't think, designed to be interpreted from a literal rationalist perspective. I don't think that when whoever was writing Genesis 1 was describing the creation of the world, that they were doing, bad science, that they were trying to actually describe the objective world. I think they were they were providing their symbolic understanding of subjective reality, right? Like the separation of subjective reality and the objective, where we can sit there, not care about the subjective meaning and analyze things scientifically, which, that's the entire point of science, right? We're trying to strip away the subjective meaning. We're trying to figure out, okay, what is objectively actually happening here? Like the I don't think so. So when you understand that people were trying to describe the subjective meaning and the relevance to behavior of their experience, then you can kind of not have to throw your scientific mind into the toilet to believe this stuff. You can simultaneously understand that, you know, the objective rationalist mind was a recent development. It's incredibly powerful and it has its uses, but you can't draw an is from an ought. And so you have to
I
figure out
can.
what ought you do. And that's what the Bible is trying to figure out. What ought a person do? What ought a person live like? It's not just bad science trying to describe the objective world, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that.
People's foundation of literacy is conditioned, and also science is about like accuracy, not so much about the procedure of objectivity.
Well, that seems irrelevant to what we're
Well,
talking about. The comment.
yeah,
Okay,
and
so
to
I can
say
agree
that
with what you're
science isn't
saying.
pursuing objectivity is pretty. I mean, that's quite a statement. What were you saying?
No, it's
I know.
about accuracy.
Okay, I don't want to have the discussion about science because I don't think that's really relevant to the main point here. I agree with you on what you said. The thing is that if the justification for tradition is that there obviously is something necessarily true about it, otherwise, how can we have persisted with it for so long? I agree. Then we're at a standpoint in history where what is true about it must be made explicit to a reason. And we can't pretend that, you know, we're just going to get away with it by saying, like, look, just return to tradition. You know, you see all this Pomo shit and, you know, skepticism. It's ruined all of you. Just go back to believing the Bible. Well, that's not how belief works, fundamentally. That's not how faith works. You know, we need to give people some kind of active understanding as to, like, why these things really ought to be established as they were.
No, and I think just like a blind return to tradition without, you know, trying to understand the meaning of these of these traditions or the value of the traditions, I think that is a regression, and it's a regression that a lot of people are willing to make instead of just losing the traditions and being, you know, in the sea without a sail, right? No, being lost, and so, but the optimal solution would of course be to, you know, synthesize tradition with the rational mind and try to find some more sophisticated understanding of everything. But at the same token, that doesn't seem to be the push of most of the secular community. Most of the secular community seems to be sitting around and saying, well, we don't need these stupid, you know, archaic attempts at terrible science around anymore, and we can just, you know, write down a few bullet points and go from there. Like that's the entire secular humanist tradition. It's like, or attempt at morality. It's like, oh, we're just going to write down 30 bullet points and that should do it. It's like I that's the same type of thinking I would expect from an engineer going into the realm of art or of any kind. Like you would, it's just ignorant. You haven't pulled all of the meaning out from from the religious traditions. I mean, can you think how many bullet points it would take to summarize all of the lessons of the Bible? I can't. I don't know how the hell you would do that. Like Cain and Abel, for example, is like the story of the human proclivity for resentment of being, right? And no one, like how many people know that story pretty much encapsulates like almost all of human morality in like I think it was like 12 sentences or something. Like it's insane. So I don't know, man.
I agree with you.
If there was an actual attempt at that, like I'd agree, like that at the synthesis, but it doesn't sound like most people are trying that. They're trying to just throw the traditions out, call them stupid, and say there's no reason I can't go suck dick on the weekends. You know?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like going back to where we started with this, where I first said that.
Yeah. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Like so. Yeah. Like I agree with everything you've said so far. Quite frankly. So, you know, so only like the other guy that I was talking to whom I said, look, tradition is stupid. I meant it in the sense of just like the people who just say, like, we just got to go back to it No explanation, just like that was working. Like, forget about these other questions that we may have about it. That's just what worked. We need to just go back. That's not good enough for today, but you agree with that as well. So I think we're just in agreement here on that. And I agree with you that the secularists today are idiots. I mean, there's no better word for it. They're stupid. These people, they don't believe in anything. They really don't believe in anything. They don't even believe in knowledge. They don't believe in truth. They don't believe in anything at all. So their whole basis is like, well, I just need to be consistent, logically consistent. And for them, logical consistency has nothing to do with real consistency. So long as I'm consistent with some abstract principle that I've just defined arbitrarily, that's good enough for me. If happiness is, like injecting myself with drugs until, because I'm doped up and high and, happy, then that's what I ought to do. It doesn't matter if it leads to my physical, psychological, and social self-destruction. Those things don't matter. Reality doesn't matter to them.
Yeah, and it's like these people are so implicitly Christian, and the only reason that morality actually works is because of how deep the whole, Mesopotamia to Nietzsche timeline has been like ground into their fucking bones. Excuse my language, but like they don't understand how amoral a person without that tradition would be, right? And so they're sitting there like just with all this tradition passed down to them implicitly. Like we all implicitly believe that like you should live a life, you should take on the tragedy of your life onto your own shoulders, and you shouldn't let other people have to pick up after you, right? Like we all implicitly believe that. Like that is not something that just cave people walked out 500,000 years ago after being apes and were like, oh yeah, that sounds good, I'll bear my cross. It's like, no, like that's the same thing with even the concept of good and evil, right? Like evil when you see it, right? Like if you've ever seen a kid shot in the face because he took someone's candy bar in like a third world country, like you start understanding that there are actual things that there are behaviors in this world that can only be adequately described as evil, and we all know this, but like they think that like I don't think that stays around without integrating these traditions in with the rational mind. I don't think that you can you can't expect people to preserve those implicit beliefs without without I guess refreshing them, and like what happens when people stop having those implicit beliefs? Well, then we go back to might is right or some other hyper nationalism or regress to primitive traditionalism, and it's like the world isn't that fun in those then, it's not, it doesn't stay this free, it doesn't stay this good, it turns to shit pretty quick.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm trying to, in my own way, to do something for unifying rationality and the ways in which we have historically lived and the ways that we even live now. There are true things about all those things. And somebody has to give some voice to the explanation of this to some extent. German idealism, I think, does quite a bit of it. Every good philosopher has actually done this to more or less success. And I think
how does Hegel play into it?
Hegel provides the absolute ground of making sense of all of this, such that, all this stuff in history, even the stuff that's been a mistake, even the stuff that now we see as evil, is justified as a necessary mistake. In that, like, of course, these things would happen. We had to do it because we begin historically in ignorance. We don't know everything. Like humanity as a whole goes through a life cycle just like we do. There's the childhood of humanity. There's the, adolescent years, which I think we're in today, and there'll be the adult years, and there'll be the years of wisdom later down the line, on the broad social level. And just as when you're a child, Well, you ought to be a child, and there's a way a child is, and your child is limited to certain extents. Children make certain mistakes necessarily because, well, they're children.
Right.
You know, for an adult to act like a child is wrong, but for a child to act like a child, well, it's understandable.
Yeah, it would be incredibly helpful for people, like especially on the founding fathers slavery hatred arc, to like to kind of get that through their fucking thick skulls, you know. I whenever I see like Thomas Jefferson or George Washington being attacked like that, it's just like, man, you would, if you could have afforded slaves, you would have had them then too, probably, dude. Like, it's terrible, but it's true.
Well, they knew what they were doing. You know, they themselves wrote against it. They all
Yeah,
knew that it was
they
an
were kind of
abominable
at the
thing.
edge, for sure. They were kind of at the edge, but I mean, still, like it wasn't nearly
Yeah, it wasn't some like historical anomaly. Like, oh, these people were specifically horrendous. No, they weren't. They were quite normal for their time.
Right, exactly.
It was
Yeah.
what it was. I mean, I personally
All
wouldn't
right,
use
who's
Hegel.
talking shit about Hegel? Who's doing this crap?
I don't know.
Who's this guy?
To go on that, however, like I wouldn't use Hegel as the basis for the direct presentation of these kinds of things. I've actually been developing some arguments to appeal to the secularists' notions, to show them that it's not impossible. And it's actually, once you understand how it works, it seems quite trivial to answer the issues that they think are impossible. Like the issues like, well, what is morality? Well, so and so defines it this way. So and so defines it that way. How could we ever know? Well, it's easy. You know, are we talking about real things or are we talking about fictitious things? Yeah, it's actually
I mean, it
quite
seems
scientific.
to be like long-term ethics. Like if you have to repeatedly interact with people, this is how you should behave.
Yeah, like, you know, like if you want to be crazy and if you want to be irrational and live in your own little world and find out after you fuck around and see what the results actually are, be my guest. You know,
right.
You will find that you will not have much social existence for long, or you won't even exist for very long, because an objectively wrong set of actions will lead to your self-destruction. Yeah, and people think that, oh, well, the only self-destruction I'm talking about is the physical. No. You can self-destroy on the physical body level, you can self-destroy on the psychological level, and you can self-destroy on the rational level. You can harm your capacity to be actually happy. You know, plenty of people achieve monetary success, material success, and yet the way that they treat other people, because they don't understand what it is to be a healthy, emotional human being, they have a problem in which they're chasing things that they believe will make them happy, but since they don't understand the actual psychological necessities of what it is to be a happy human, they follow things that aren't real. And so they end up unhappy no matter what. Likewise, people who are engaged in false forms of rationality are harming themselves. Why? Because if you don't know how to think about things properly, you're mired in a world of confusions. You're mired in a world in which you don't know how to communicate. You don't know how to think through what would be something that's like actually a true object of value and something that's not. And so you have people who waste their times, like on this server. Most people come here just to debate emptily and to literally abuse their own minds through a deliberate misuse, which they don't even realize is a misuse because they're ignorant of what actual rationality is for. And so when they meet an actually rational person, they have harmed themselves so badly that they cannot recognize actual sound reasoning. I don't know if you've ever encountered people here, but there are people here who apparently don't understand basic English. You know, they don't understand, you know, that you tell them something
Social
like,
norms.
well, what does that mean? Can you define this word? Can you define that word? Like, well, I mean the same thing every average person means. When you go to the grocery store and you know, like, a banana from an apple.
Morons in there for sure. But like I don't know, the way it was explained to me was like money is a way to get other people to do what you want, but there's some things that only you can do. You know? And it's like if you're not living a life that gives you meaning, like you can have all the money, you're fucked. It's over.
I have a question.
Sure.
When you're giving your account of rationality, are you like stating like there's like an actual purpose of rationality, or are you just like describing what you think is the purpose? Like, are
There's
you
an
giving
actual
like?
purpose.
Yeah, there's
uh,
certainly a
I
purpose.
was just like curious, like where would that like objective purpose come from?
Being itself.
Could you expand more on that? Because like you have to understand, right? Like that's not going to be very substantive to me, who's not too
Yeah.
familiar with the philosophy
Yeah.
you engage in.
Yeah, so I mean, this all hinges on the consequence of at least one thing that perhaps you may agree with. Because if you don't agree with, well, I would say you're irrational. The universe, reality, God, whatever you want to call it, the domain of being, everything that is within it. Right?
Yeah.
Right. So this domain is itself the domain of being. Beyond it, there's nothing. So whatever is in the domain of being and is of the domain of being. And whatever is efficacious is only within that domain and of that domain. So whatever makes the domain of being be the thing that it is and the way that it is can only come, well, from it, because outside it is nothing, and nothing is not efficacious, it's not being. It cannot determine anything within being, so whatever being is has to come from itself. Right?
Yeah, I'd accept that.
Yeah, so being has to be self-determining. Now, whatever being produces can only follow forth from its own nature. As it is self-productive, what it will produce is finite beings within itself have to, in some manner, carry on the capacities and actualities of self-production to some extent.
I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't sure if I followed that last part.
So let me give you another arguments related to this.
Okay.
Now, in common language, people talk about objectivity. Obviously, if you ask them, well, what is objectivity? They wouldn't give you very satisfying answers, and they'd be very vague. But I think that one of the core intuitive things that people do mean by this implicitly is that by the objectives, they're talking about something which is independent not only of my consciousness, but independent of other things that would determine it. So to be an object is to be that which has some kind of independent self-determination by which it makes itself the kind of thing that it is, away from or, irrelevant or not reducible to or not, determined by some other factor of another being. Just as like my will, the cat is the cat, whether I like it or not, and I may want it to be a dog, but it's a cat. And no amount of me wanting it will change its nature. And the cat, no amount of trying to feed it vegetarian food will turn it into, a vegan. It needs meat. So the nature of the cat, literally in a metaphorical sense, objects, just in the way that, one would object to this or that. You would object to the proposition of somebody else, or you would object to being treated in a certain manner. An object objects, resists being determined by another because it has its own internal nature.
And so how would that account for social evolution then? Are you just gonna account for social evolution by saying that nature of social evolution would determine itself, or?
Yes, I would say that is exactly what would count for it.
Yeah, like human beings.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, human being, a lot of times when people talk about objective purpose, they're coming at it from the perspective of a mind outside of everything, looking around, looking at the universe and looking for some purpose outside of the constraints of human existence. And like you were saying, an object objects and it has its own nature. Human beings are an entity that have their own nature. And I think it was Sokolov that discovered the orienting reflex, which is a part of it's a mechanism in the brain that orients you towards the things that have sort of like the unknown, but it's not not just the unknown. It's the glimmer of light in the unknown that might that I guess is like is symbolized quite a bit throughout Western literature, like the golden snitch. I think is symbology in Harry Potter of it. But basically, it orients you towards I guess what you need. Is it need to progress? I don't know. I need to reread this again, but it's Sokolov. It's called the orienting reflex. And so basically, human beings have a nature in that, we have biological drives to reproduce. We have social drives. We have we have we already have a set of purposes kind of built into us by culture and by our biology, to the point that if you start sitting outside that and asking what is like objective meaning in and of itself, you start to kind of exceed the bounds of your own hardware, I guess, in my mind. And people who focus on that can think themselves out of pursuing their own natural purpose in a way that is ultimately self-defeating. See what I'm saying?
I would disagree that you would get out of the bounds of your capacities, because I think as far as cognitive knowledge goes, there is no bound. But to bring it back to like why I brought that up, so given like what I told you, like how I'm defining objectivity, now you may define it otherwise, and that's perfectly fine. In this discussion, this only appears as a postulation on my part, but everybody's going to appear that way necessarily. So given that the universe is something which stands out, it is absolutely independent, nothing else would determine it, its nature has to be intrinsic to it. Whenever there is some kind of finite object, like a particle, say, an atom in the universe, something like that is not merely a contingent object. At least, when we engage with particles, we observe that they do have an objectivity to them because they have a nature that resists internally to whatever we may want to do with them. We can't make atoms conjoin with each other, for example, willy-nilly. They have their own internal rules by which the chemical joining of them works, regardless of what we want. We cannot construct an arbitrary atom. We can't say, well, we decide that hydrogen is going to have like 5 protons today. Well, no, that's not what a hydrogen atom is, and it will not operate as hydrogen. This is a principle that is beyond our capacity to determine, and it's beyond any other thing's capacity to determine as far as we can tell. Something about the material forces bind things together into atoms and then maintain them in that way. So to the extent that the universe is the one absolute objectivity, but all things that are real objects that aren't like something like a heap of sand, for example, is not a real object. It does not bring itself together by any power. It does not maintain itself together. It's purely a conglomeration of other actual objects, like say crystals or minerals, which do bind themselves through some chemical process and maintain themselves that way. But the mound of sand itself doesn't. So there's plenty of fictitious objects in the world that only seem to be objects, but actually are just compositions of other real objects. And then all objects do not share the same amount of objectivity. Something like the universe is going to be the absolute object because it is the total self-determination of itself. Something like hydrogen only exists within a certain kind of context in which it can be enabled, but once it is enabled to exist, its own nature brings it together. It can't be determined by just the conditions which allow it to be, no more than the existence of the alphabet necessitates that you're going to write Macbeth or something like that.
Does existence exist?
Yes.
So I want to make sure.
What does that mean?
Oh, sorry.
Well, we're not going to derail into the side
Like,
discussion.
what do you
but,
think predication?
Yeah, bye, Rev. I caught you fast this time.
He keeps coming back.
So with your okay, so I want to make sure I'm following what you're saying here. So when you say when you say these objects determine themselves, what might you say to and I have like a very elementary understanding of this. it's going to be this account of objects as it seems to reveal to us in quantum physics that our very viewing of the object changes the relation of the object to itself, such that there's this parallax. And the parallax is going to be the way in which, if you shift and change the observer of an object, it seems to be the case that the object as such changes as well. Are you going to object to that account of like how objects exist, or are you going to say like that's already accounted for in like a Hegelian view?
Yeah, I will reject part of that account, but the other part I can accept. So the thing about us as observers changing the quantum state of anything, that's false. That's a misconstrual that it has been popularized for reasons that are beyond me, because it never should have been the case that it was popularized that way. Measurement and observation in quantum mechanics has nothing to do with a conscious observer. Measurement and observation literally just are fancy ways of talking about relationships. To observe in the quantum domain is literally just to have something that relates to that, wave equation. And the wave equation is merely a representational mathematical formalism. It does not tell you the ontology of what this wave actually is. It does not tell you that it's material like reality. It just tells you that as far as a certain determination, we are making probabilistic guesses on this. The probability is complete. We know the full range of where this particle might be, but we just don't know how to determine that. So we need something to set the thing, which would be a relationship, which would be also a context. So to the extent that context and relationships do determine things, I will agree to that. But this doesn't say anything. Why does, insofar as let's take the quantum field, wave equation, whatever you want to call it, why does it collapse? Because it has some kind of nature which, given a certain context, will arrange itself that way. And the reason I say it has a certain kind of nature, and it's not like the pile of sand, is because, at least with these entities, we do interact with them, and we can tell that they do resist and they do object. And they object very strongly. You have to pry very hard on an atom to get it to split, because its own internal forces bind it together so strongly. And they come together.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that's very interesting. Is there any specific books that go into detail on that idea that you're aware of, or is it just going to be dispersed throughout the literature?
Which idea?
The notion, this whole account you've been giving of how being determines itself, or is that just going to be all of Hegelian literature is just going to be describing that notion?
I do get this from Hegelianism, but this is my own distillation, and it's my own presentation in a more formal manner.
Okay, so that it's more.
So it's my thing. I've never encountered this specifically anywhere, though I think the closest thing probably you would find in more classical philosophy. This is a kind of account that you would find something that's not exactly on this line, but very analogically related to it. You would find it in Plato, you would find it in Aristotle, definitely the Neoplatonics. You can find it in ancient Chinese philosophy, for example, Confucianism and Neo-Confucianism, especially Neo-Confucianism. This idea that the structure of the whole has to be mirrored in the parts, and the whole is self-determining. Therefore, the parts, to some extent, have to be self-determining. Because if they're not, then, they're just like grains of sand. But then in the grains of sand, the piles of sand are constructed from grains of sand. So there has to be some kind of actual object. And we do experientially observe and relate to actual objects, things that do resist us with their nature, whether we like it or not. And the way this ends up connecting to morality is that this sets up that whatever we talk about with goodness is something real. It's not something fictitious. Insofar as we talk about, what things ought to be, for example, you can have fictitious things. You can say, well, I think that a rock ought to have a chicken. Well, is that the case? No. And why do we know that? Well, because we can see that the nature of a rock does not lead to any consequence of hatching into a chicken, just as a chicken doesn't, lay a rock as an egg. in these, there is a fact to the statements of oughtness. We can say that there is an avocado seed, if you plant it and given the conditions that enable it to engage its nature, ought to grow into an avocado tree that grows avocados. Why? Because that is the fact of what that is. Sure, it's temporally extended. At one moment it's a seed, another moment it's going to be the full tree, another moment it's going to be fruiting. But these are part of the nature of the avocado as such that from what it is, I can tell you what it ought to be. And the ought is not something that is just made up by me. The ought is internal to what it already is.
But how does that sorry, like how does one draw the ought? Because when people refer to typically when people are talking about the Hume issue of ought and is, they're referring specifically to the implications for human behavior as it regards to any given fact, right? So atoms are very difficult to split. Okay, what are the implications? How do I draw any sort of moral implications from that? So like how would you basically pull a human morality or implications for human behavior from your philosophy?
Right. Then we just, from that, the question is then, well, what is the determination of what it is to be human? What is human nature? Because only once we know that will we know, well, what then ought the human to be? And then given what the human ought to be, from that you can contextualize individually what actions and what contexts lead a person to actualizing that.
I think there's also a mention here to be made about how I mean, I'm not sure how much Antonio Wolff is going to accept modern day academic philosophy, the typical analytic stuff, but analytic philosophy essentially regards the is-ought gap as a non-problem now. It's been solved numerous times in accordance. One instance of the way analytic philosophy would probably respond to the is-ought gap is by showing and demonstrating how there seems to be an issue with the is-ought gap when applied to other things. So if you take the is-ought gap to be true, you'll be led to the chicken gap. And the chicken gap is going to be, I could instantiate an innumerable amount of premises which describe what something is, but I could never reach the conclusion that it's, for instance, a chicken. So I could name this premise that it has 2 legs, it has feathers. I could even name the species of the chicken. But so long as I don't have the premise that it is a chicken, I'm incapable of concluding that it's a chicken. So one response that analytic philosophy is going to have to the is-ought gap is just going to be that, sure, it might be true, but if it is true, it's going to lead us to an impossibility to garner any actual practical knowledge. So that's one response analytic philosophy might have to the is-ought gap.
I don't think it's a correct assessment to say that analytic philosophy doesn't take the is-ought gap seriously. For instance, people like Searle propose certain things that are rejected. I know the paper you're referring to, the animal in question that was used was hedgehog as opposed to chicken.
Yeah, hedgehog.
It's not well acclaimed. It's very much still upheld as a quote unquote problem. And I disagree with you. I don't think you're accurately presenting the state of analytic philosophy in analytic moral philosophy.
I'm going to probably say I am, insofar as, there's just an innumerable amount of papers which cover it, and it is a joke in
Wait, guys,
certain departments.
I'm confused.
There's a joke in certain departments about how, analytic philosophy is solving it again and again. This is really just going to end up being a dispute about popularity, but I think the objection itself, it holds true.
How does analytical philosophy tell me what I should do about a chicken if I see it?
That's a whole different kind of
worms. that's gonna be a whole different thing.
No,
what I was describing was just
gap.
Well, what I was just describing was going to be the issue how logic, when taken to its pinnacle, is not going to allow us to derive many conclusions.
Sure.
Well, that's
But
analytic
that's
logic, but my logic does
analytic.
everything.
Yeah, strictly speaking from this single perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't think analytic logic, or I've never seen anybody give an account like mine, because an account like mine does answer it. Unless you count, like Neoplatonics and stuff like under analytics, because they still kind of privilege formal logic, even though they go beyond it a lot of times.
Wait, how does your philosophy allow human beings to expand past? Well, would you say that the nature of human beings is to evolve their nature to adapt to, to become more productive or adaptive or, to improve, I guess?
Yeah, I would say that in my view, the nature of the human is to be free. So the human so just as the universe or being or God, whatever you want to call it, is a self-productive, self-making being, the human being is the reflection of that fully concretized in the world, where our striving is towards a total freedom, and this is what the freedom of the will has to do with, particularly.
And how would you describe freedom? Like, would it be
self-determination?
I guess self-determination. Okay.
And
I mean, it's really interesting actually. Like how much this aligns, I guess, with the ultimate implications, I guess, of the Christian.
Yeah, the Christian worldview, and it vindicates almost all traditions in their cores. It vindicates the family. It vindicates the structure of the family. It vindicates the structure of society as having laws, civil society as having economics, as having a particular domain of spirituality, have particular domains of education, and the very idea of rights, the very idea of these objective necessities, which are not simply haphazard necessities. You don't have haphazard rights. You have rights that you actually need to be free. You need property to be free. You need to have the freedom of thinking. You need to have the freedom of being able to move between communities when you don't fit in one. You need to have a lot of different things. You need to have political freedom in certain ways. And these are very specific. And there's a very specific way to be free. Being free is not willy-nilly. You're not free just because you say you're free. It's not like, oh, well, just fuck off, let me be free. No. A child may not want to go to school because, they don't like it. Well, too bad. They're going to be forced to be free, whether they like it or not. They're going to be forced to have to learn and come to a very basic rationality to be a functional operating member of society and to be minimally responsible for their actions.
I'm glad your definition of freedom is sophisticated enough to allow for the, impermanent subjugation to necessary learning or discipline or whatever. Like a lot of times when I hear secularists or people in general refer to freedom, it's like I don't want to be told what to do. It's like, well, you gotta subject yourself in order to actually be free in a society that has demands. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, and it also goes with being. And people I've had arguments with people here where they're like, well, that's just because you think that's good. Why is being good? I'm like, well, if you don't think being is good, why haven't you killed yourself? And they're like, well, that's not an argument. No, it is an argument. It is very much an argument. Now, you can pretend to be stupid in front of me, but you haven't killed yourself, so don't pretend to me that you actually believe this. Because if you actually believe this, one, you'd be dead, and two, everyone like you would be dead. And guess what? The people who actually want to be and exist, they're going to keep, maintaining their being, increasing their being, reproducing it, and determining this world of being, whereas you are out, and you have no place here. Because why? You were wrong. It's that simple.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like you never see those people sawing off their own foot just to look at it on the inside of it.
Yeah, I think that ties
well, you
into
might
the
find one or two
notion
people
of objectivity, because in a sense, I can assert whatever I want is good in a conversation, but the world is always going to object to certain types of assertions because there's an objectivity to it. I can say I value dying, but then the world is going to push back on me because that's not in truth what it is that I value.
Right. And if it was what you valued, well, then you are a fucked being. You are defective from the factory, and that's too bad, so sad. but the rest of the world doesn't have to pay attention to you in that way.
Also, just one last question. It's pretty unrelated, but when it comes to dialectics, I was just wondering. Okay, Marxists give an account that dialectics are a method, but I was under the impression for Hegel it is just a description of how thought moves. Are either of those accurate accounts, or what do you think?
Yeah, for Hegel, it's just a description. It's not a prescription. You can't prescribe thinking. You either think or you don't, and when you think, you will have those things arise.
Do you know? This is just random thought, but do you know maybe why people would have been under the impression that like it is some sort of method that we ought to prescribe or like think our way through rather than just like accepting it as a description of the way we think?
Yeah, people came upon that because they're stupid and they don't read Hegel, and
That's
a
fair.
bunch of people just kept saying it, and everybody just keeps repeating it, but it's not true.
Yeah. Okay.
By the
That
way,
makes
I
sense.
linked you a set of formalizations that I've been working on to present this kind of view. You can check them out whenever you want, or if you want.
Were these on your Discord? Because I'm in there, but I.
Yeah, I posted them on the announcements earlier.
Thank you.
But if you're more analytically inclined, which it seems that you are, your feedback on those would actually be very helpful.
Oh, I want to be clear. I'm not at all. I'm very much so continentally inclined.
Oh, okay. Well, then your feedback would also be helpful.
All right, dope.
So yeah, I mean, like in the case of anything, you have to give an ontological count, because without a link to ontology, what in the world are you talking about? You know, these people going like, well, you know, I think, you know, the ontology is true. Well, what about the ontology? Well, because the ontology, at least in the Kantian sense, you can justify just about everything, so long as you phrase it the right way. Same thing with utilitarianism. And utilitarianism doesn't even work. It's a whole self-contradictory. Well, it's not a self-contradictory principle. It's an indeterminate principle. You can never like actually justify anything because you don't even know what it is that you're justifying. You can't say what the ultimate end of anything is because you don't know.
Right. Utilitarians typically pick the most convenient or immediate time frame to determine the utility of an action, and don't ever grapple with like what do you do when what do you turn to when the utility of something is indeterminate, especially over a long time period. Like I don't know how utilitarians don't become traditionalists by just looking at, you know, tradition as an attempt to determine the best long-term strategy for, you know, I guess goodness or whatever, right? Like I don't know.
Because the length
Kinda
of
break down.
time is just arbitrary for them. They can't. There's nothing in utilitarianism that tells you how far you ought to think. Is it just as far as myself? Is it as far as my family, society, my life? You know, the life of this society. And the principle is open-ended. And even if you make those distinctions, so, okay, I'm going to sort of try to see like the life goal of humanity. You don't know the ultimate consequences because there's consequence. It's a butterfly effect problem. You know, you decide that you want to do X, and you think X is good, and you have justification that, you know, according to the arbitrary principle of what you think is good, this maximizes it. But the world doesn't stop where you want it to stop. The world keeps going. You may save somebody, you may help somebody, and it seems good at the time. You know, the next day they might murder somebody. The next 10 years later, you know, they might be like the next, you know, Lenin or Hitler, you know, good or bad. You don't know. And even on the wide scale of things that may seem good now can be very bad in the end. You know, fossil fuels supposedly, you know, I'm saying supposedly because I don't quite buy into that, but let's assume that it is. You know, we thought fossil fuels were good. It was very helpful, grew the economies exponentially, but now we're dealing with so-called climate crisis. In which case, you know, there's a fact of, well, you know, like given a certain understanding, people thought they knew what they were going for, but that's not what they got. And in other ways, there are things in which, bad things have happened, seemingly, but down the line, it turns out to be a good thing. And this happens all the time. It happens in our personal life, and it has happened on the vast history of humanity. So nobody knows the ultimate consequence of anything that they do. So if the justification is, well, I want good consequences, well, what is the consequence that's supposed to be good here?
I know an ultimate consequence of something.
Not of this kind.
Well, it was cool talking with you, dude. I gotta head out. So nice meeting you, man.
See ya.
I think I think a utilitarian is probably going to say that they're not looking for any sort of ultimate consequence, and it's just going to be like rationally reflecting upon the foreseeable consequences. Like, of course, if I flip a rock, there's the possibility that like a horse will deck me or something, right? But a utilitarian is just going to say that like as so long as something is foreseeable and so long as I can calculate it, then that's all that's going to be needed to look at. There seemed to be a separate argument you also made where you stated that it almost seemed like you made an argument where utilitarians are going to have to infinitely calculate because, well, they're going to have to calculate the calculations of the calculations. But a utilitarian's probably just going to give the account that they, once again, are just going to stop calculating once it seems to provide enough utility. And then when you also seem to make a third argument about how a utilitarian is going to understand what's good. Depending on the utilitarian, some of them will just state that it's intuitively good. So like, I know that pleasure is intuitively good and pain is intuitively bad because intuitively I wouldn't want to put my hand on a hot stove. So that's probably going to be like the account that a utilitarian would give. You wouldn't ask someone a question like, oh, I don't want to put my hand on the stove because it hurts. You're not going to say, well, why does it hurt? Or why is that bad that it hurts? Right? For a utilitarian, they're just gonna say well,
I would say that.
Well, certain utilitarian analytic philosophers would make the objection that just like it's intuitive.
Yeah, so you see how all those answers are subjective?
I'd say all of this is derived by like the fact that we exist within the context of the human condition and certain stimuli apply on our physiology and neurology, right? Which get a negative reaction. Like by definition, a physiological negative reaction.
Yeah, and that is relevant. Why?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
You just joined this call. I mean,
no, I'm just responding to something somebody said. That's all.
Yeah, but you don't know what the context is.
I agree. I was responding to something specifically within a very specific context, a very tiny thing.
Yeah, so I'm just probably going to disagree and say the negativity of the positivity of the negativity disproves that. Yeah.
I disagree with you. Would you like to discuss it?
Well, hold on. We're not done yet.
The ultimate consequence
I would like to hear your
is Jesus' crucifixion.
I wanted to.
We're
I
gonna
wanted
stay
to
on
go to
track.
heaven.
We're
I
gonna
wanted to
stay on track,
respond
guys.
to-
We're gonna stay on track.
Yeah, I wanted to respond
anyways.
to a
Oh,
couple
do you want to
things.
respond to that? Okay, you go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and respond to it because I think we have similar critiques in a sense that utilitarianism is always going to encompass a level of arbitrary decision making and subjective sorts of rational processes because the approach I would take in part is no action can actually be said to be good or bad because what preconditions such judgments is the totality of its consequences, which as of right now, number one, we don't have access to conceptually, and number two, they haven't come to fruition. So not only can we make any judgments about that, but there's there's going to be a level of computation that we cannot do. So ultimately what I think utilitarians do is they just guess on what they think is going to quote unquote bring about the most good in accordance with whatever standard they subjectively choose. And on top of that, there's going to be room for sorts of irrationality, just upholding certain types of traditions because they arbitrarily view them as perpetuating and upholding this sort of ideal they've created in their minds.
Well, I think a utilitarian might just respond by saying it's not arbitrary, it's based on what's maximizing pleasure. And
That is
I
arbitrary.
guess. Oh, I'm not saying I believe this. I'm just giving like an account a utilitarian might have. And a utilitarian could also make the argument that what you're describing might be an issue for theoretical ethics, but that it won't be an issue for practical ethics. Because a utilitarian would probably make a pretty fine line between.
No, I think it's the
practical and
reverse. It's
theoretical.
not a problem in theory if you had enough information, but in principle, in practice, it's almost impossible to be a true utilitarian. And I don't think that's how anyone lives their life, really.
Oh no, like I'm okay with homosexuals or whatever.
Are you okay with homosexuals?
Yeah, okay, that's nice.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not getting off on the stupid. AW, what do you want the?
We're talking about objective morality, so it changes the.
Oh, okay, sure. Bam.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious that the utilitarian has no response. It's all subjective. Well, it is where I think it's useful, where I think it's obvious. There is no rational justification as to where any demarcation is made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd probably disagree with your objection. Yeah.
Probably or certainly.
Well, I don't. Okay, I'm gonna keep it a buck. I don't like to say I'm certain about anything. I just say probably. I say probably and seems for everything, and I never come to a conclusion.
I come to conclusions like this.
I'll hit you with a really nice conclusion. A equals A. Hey, buddy, what you think of that conclusion?
Well, sure, it is to me. But is it for itself?
Oh no. Yeah. I think the obsession with certainty can. I'm not saying this is in like all instances, but I think it tends to come off immature. Insofar as it tends to be the case that those who, let's just put it lightly, are not very rational. They tend to be more certain about things than they should be, I think.
Well, sure, but like that's the structure of development. Children are stupid. They don't understand that they're stupid. So, they're certain about things that they are actually uncertain of because they don't know any better. A teenager starts to reason, starts to question, and realizes, oh, geez, I'm stupid. They have a little Socrates moment, hopefully, and they start, unraveling everything, realizing that they don't really know very much and that they can't yet see that anybody else knows very much. Now, once you get to an adulthood, you ought to have one personal experience from life experience, and you ought to have developed through that in a generality such that your intellectual capacities have matured to a certain extent, in which now you have a certain grounding in actuality for particular certainties. So that, yes, the old person and the young person are very similar on a superficial level. But on the deep level, it's not the same at all. And this is rationally sensible. It makes perfect sense why this would be the case.
Sure. It's just, I'm so I double major in mathematics and economics. And given the fact that I'm an undergrad studying those two things, I wouldn't say like I yet have the knowledge capable to come to any like objective certainty about anything. So like insofar as I cannot really like rationally make an argument that leads me to some sort of certainty, I prefer to just use seems and probably.
Yeah, sure, makes sense.
I think it's pretty fair to do that. at least at this point in my life.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I ever did that. I think even in my most skeptical, like there was a point in time in which I accepted skepticism was true, and I was certain about that. I was never this radical skeptic of like I'm so skeptic that I don't even know that I'm a skeptic. No, I was really certain about that.
Yeah, I won't lie. When it comes to like if I'm so I do like competitive debate. If I'm doing competitive debate, I won't be so uncertain about things. But I don't know. Insofar as just for my personal life, I don't know if I like to be too certain.
Yeah, I never understood the extreme skepticism because there always seems like there's a level of certainty. And I mean, even just the immediacy of experience, there's some certainty there that something seems, and then you can pick out certain logical structures, etc. So I always found very, very, very hard skeptics to be almost disingenuous. Like they're saying one thing, but they really, really cannot possibly believe it.
I mean, if you're a hard skeptic, it almost seems that there's a self-contradiction in it insofar as if I'm skeptical about being skeptical, that's going to be self-defeating. And I won't say Hegel believes this, but individuals say Hegel believes that. So I guess that's a way to phrase it. Where a lot of people state that in the phenomenology, Hegel is making the argument that skeptics are self-defeating when they're skeptical, because if you're skeptical about skepticism, that just defeats the entirety of skepticism. I'm not sure if that's an accurate account at all, though.
He says something along that line in the introduction. Just talking about how the skeptics are not fully skeptic. They still believe that they know what reason is and that reason has some access to a so-called truth, and they think that they're searching for it. But Hegel says, well, why wouldn't you be skeptical of that as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the problem with the skeptics is that they're not skeptical enough, and Hegel says, I'm going to do one better. I am going to be more skeptical than they are.
It just depends on what skeptics you're talking about. There are some pretty skeptical skeptics.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be like a criticism of a very specific type of skepticism, of course. Like if you're a skeptic in terms of like brain in a vat, that probably wouldn't be an objection you'd make.
Oh, it would be an objection.
Really? How would that objection work?
Those people assume that they have any knowledge about a so-called reality, that is anything true, and that reason has any access and validity to say anything at all.
The brain in the vat thing isn't the assertion that you're a brain in the vat, right? It's just that you
It's
can't
just saying that you
distinguish.
don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, this would assume that they would know. So they're taking knowledge for granted.
It's not the assertion of knowing, it's like the lack of a position, right?
No, but a lack of a position is based on the determinate doubt that you have a reason to doubt.
If I say to you A times 3 is equal to B, and you don't do the algebra to solve that, then you just don't have a position, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, what's wrong with doing that?
Well, the brain of the vat thing is not about a position. The brain of the vat thing is telling you something very intelligible. Now, if the skeptic says, like, look, I don't know anything. I don't even know what's a valid object of cognition. I don't know that reason has anything to do with reality. I don't know that there is such a thing as reality because I don't know that concepts even have anything to do with anything. And then that person is left in a position of like, I just don't know. But they're not making a positive one about like, I know that I don't know. They're saying, I really don't know what any of this stuff is. So the question is, if I don't know, there are people out there who do claim to know. Well, let's see. Let's see if what they say makes sense. Because ultimately, the arbiter of all of this is, does it make sense to me or not?
That's moving the goalpost there, right? Usually when we're talking about no, we're talking about certainty.
What is certainty?
Whether something is persuasive or not is completely different.
No, it's not about persuasive. Certainty here is about, does something make sense? It's not about persuading me, because I can feel that I'm persuaded, even if things make no sense. But I am here required to explicitly make sense of things.
Certainty in epistemology being the technical term, right, of rational justification, epistemically justified.
No, not even that. Certainty is just that which cannot be otherwise.
That's how I'm using. Yeah, that's how I'm using it. Something can be persuasive and it cannot be certain, right?
Right.
I would move into whether you find it persuasive or not.
Yeah, and here the requirement is not whether you're persuaded. The requirement is, does it make sense or does it not make sense?
Well, things can definitely make sense and be wrong by reasoning rules, right?
No, that's why you don't inject your own reasoning rules. You just make sense of things. You don't have to be aware of the rules of logic to think. People thought long before the rules of logic were codified by Aristotle. So we don't have to appeal to the rules of logic. We can think without them.
I don't know what you mean by rules of logic. If are you talking about Aristotelian logic?
Any formalized logic in which, I'm supposed to do, and I have the law of identity and contradiction. Those arise as an after
who you
fact.
ask what that actually means, right? Some people think that that's just how the brain operates. Like if you
No,
ask
it doesn't. It doesn't depend on who you
logic.
ask. It doesn't depend on what it is at all.
Definitely,
You don't
definitely
have
does,
to
right?
assume it.
Like-
No, it doesn't. Okay,
like
we're talking about
Leibniz
this.
and
Okay,
George-
hold on.
Leibniz and George Lakoff have different
We were
ontologies of the law of
talking about
identity.
the skeptic. We're not talking about Leibniz. We're not talking about people putting forth a positive position. We're talking about the skeptic who is being honest and says, "I just don't know." Well, how are they ever going to come to know?
Yeah, why do they have to?
Well, they want to know. They're curious. That's why they're a skeptic.
No, they don't. They don't want to. They just don't know. That's you want to know, right? But they don't have to.
No. I mean, like you can pretend to be stupid right now, and you're not talking on behalf of the skeptic. You're talking on your own behalf.
not
But
a
I'm
good
talking about that is a good argument. The skeptic,
Saying you can
the
pretend to be stupid is a
skeptics,
really bad faith
the skeptics. It is not a bad cage. You're being bad faith right now, and
I disagree.
well, yeah, a stupid person doesn't realize they're stupid, but that's not my problem.
So you're calling your interlocutor stupid, but you're being good faith.
Yeah, you're stupid. Bye. I've had this discussion like 2 times today. I don't need to have it again.
Well, do you think like all skeptics like think the same though? Like, do you think that like all of them are in the search of like truth or like to know something?
Why do you think a skeptic becomes a skeptic?
I mean, I don't psychologically. I don't know. Like, there just seems to be different categories.
Well, no. Like, we're talking about the actual skeptic. There's a bunch of people who call themselves skeptics. They're not skeptics. The actual skeptic, in the classical sense, the original sense, is somebody who has come to the knowledge that they don't know anything, and that they don't know that anybody else knows anything, and can justify anything. That's the position of the skeptic. People like Descartes, like, I'm being skeptical. The methodological skepticism, that's not skepticism. The person who says, I'm a skeptic because, I don't believe things that, aren't proven to me. That's not what skepticism is.
Okay, like, well, let's say like what we like accept in like Western philosophy. Do you think there's some people that are labeled skeptics that probably wouldn't fit? Say that, like, I don't think I could ever know, and I also don't have any like value in trying to figure out something that I could know.
No, those people aren't skeptics.
Well, what I'm asking is like, are there some people that we label skeptics that would fall under that categorization?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
It sounds like it's just going to be a verbal dispute about the definition of skeptic.
Yeah. Autistic
Well, sure.
semantics. Everybody loves that, don't they?
Yeah, it's already happened anyways, but I mean, I'm using a historical definition to the school from which the name literally originates.
Do you know that that's an authoritative school?
Yes, I do. Oh, you're
No,
not skeptical
buddy.
because you're assuming things.
Sure, buddy. You think you know what skepticism is.
So do you know or do you not?
I'm skeptical, you know.
Do you know or do you not?
I'm trolling. Just making jokes on skepticism being self-refuting.
Well, it's not. You're not making a point about skepticism. It's irrelevant to the point of skepticism.
You can't make a point about skepticism.
The skeptic is not the person who's stupid and just says, "I don't know what I believe." That's not what the skeptic is doing.
Yeah, there's a difference between what people today talk about when they say skepticism and what skepticism has meant for most of human history, and also, where skepticism began. There's a huge difference there.
Anyone who tries to tell you that skepticism is a thing is not actually a skeptic, just someone who's confused.
Based on what?
Because they're making a claim when they're saying you can't know the veracity of any claim.
That's not what the skeptic says. The skeptic doesn't say there can't be knowledge. The skeptic says, I don't know. Bring forth some claim. Let's analyze it.
So why are they making claims?
They don't. What are you talking about? They don't.
To know-
Again, so if you don't know the historical school of skepticism, you ought to not be commenting on this. Because I'm talking about the historical school. I'm not talking about your own subjective fiction or somebody else's subjective fiction about skepticism. The actual historical school of skeptics did not say, we don't think anybody knows or can know anything. That's not their position. Their position is, we don't know anything. We have a method by which we test any claims from anybody who would tell us that they do. And our purpose is merely to test these. Now, insofar as historically they didn't find anybody who succeeded their gauntlet, they said, well, we haven't arrived at any conclusions. All the things that we find are either refuted through contradiction, shown to be some kind of incoherence, or shown to be impossible to prove against their opposite because their opposite is just as rationally viable. Therefore, we can make no decision about truths here concerning these topics. That's all the skeptic says. The skeptic is not a stupid person who says nobody can know anything. That's not what they say. So what the fuck are you talking about?
Okay, so what I'm saying is if you claim to be a skeptic, you're claiming to know what a skeptic is.
Did they claim that? Do you know what the skeptics claimed? The skeptics claimed to arrive at the practical experience of ataraxia, which is just being okay in equanimity with not having the certainty of knowing. And could they say that? Yeah. Did they, if you ask them, well, justify that, they'd be like, justify what? It's not a knowledge claim.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So then, like, what's your argument here? Like, they never made such an argument, so, like, what are you arguing against?
Okay, they're claiming to have a methodology.
Now, yes.
What's a methodology?
Well, the methodology is about making sense of things. I think what is like 5 modes or something? Sextus Empiricus. It's a set of just rational inquiries.
They don't even know. They don't even claim to know what rationality is.
True, they don't, and that's what Hegel critiques them for. Like, they just assume that they knew what was rational and that they would ever recognize an answer if they encountered one.
Yeah.
So that's why he says they were not skeptical enough.
Yeah, a true skeptic will just be quiet.
Sure, on their own thing, because they have nothing to say, and they were. You know, from their own standpoint, they never made any positive assertions. People came to them and they said, I know something, I can prove I knew. And they're like, okay, sure, let us see.
Are you a skeptic?
No. I mean, I think I'm properly skeptical, you know, if I want to, like, treat somebody charitably.
You think that?
I will just not assume anything on my part. I will go with what they say, and we'll see how that works out.
Oh, you're just unbiased or claiming to be.
No, you can be unbiased.
Biased, okay.
Now, it's not my fault that people don't know what it is that they say. And I can draw
How do you
out
know
things.
How do you know they don't know? Maybe you just don't understand.
No, I do.
No, you don't.
Sure, I do. I think.
If you understood what they were saying, you'd probably end up saying the same
Well,
thing.
how do you understand this, for example? Given an infinite 2D plane, limit this to 2D. Within that plane, with straight lines, what is the minimal number of straight lines to fully enclose a space?
Well, there's no space in 2D. But if you mean an area, that'd be 3, right?
Sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I also laughed at the whole there's no space in 2D.
I just feel like even if it's true, I don't know if there's a point in pointing it out.
Well, it's not true. It's a spatial dimension, so of course.
Yeah.
Now, how is it that you understand that question? Like, how do you know that these things interrelate in such a way that the answer is necessarily 3?
Because I'm not a retarded skeptic.
Well, no, that's not what I'm asking. But how do you understand it? There is a specific way you understand.
Well, 2D is like where you like 1D is a line, 2D is like a line moving to form a plane, and if you just put out infinite, you didn't specify curvature, because if there's curvature, you only need really one line.
I told you only a 2D, so obviously invoking other dimensions will be cheating.
Yeah, but 2D planes can have curvature.
No, they can't, because you're curving through the 3D plane, and I told you only a 2D plane.
It is still only a 2D plane.
No, you're curving it through 3D, and I'm telling you only a 2D plane. So see, in this case, you're not being a proper skeptic. You're injecting your own presuppositions aside from what I have said. If you just take exactly what I said, there's only one answer. And you got the right answer. Now, how did you get that right answer?
So a sphere that is perfectly smooth. And
we're not talking about 3D. Again, why are you talking about this? I specifically asked about a 2D plane.
I'm not.
So where are you bringing in these higher dimensions which nobody talked about? The proper skeptic does not inject. Well, no, I'm not going to stop interrupting until you stop interjecting with irrelevant things. I asked about a 2D plane, so give me an explanation within 2D about how you arrived at the conclusion.
Well, again, so like 2D without curvature, you can have like either converging or parallel lines, basically. And if they converge in an infinite sort of plane, they're not actually ever going to close off an area. But so you have to have a third line to close it off. Basically to form some sort of triangle. But when it comes to surfaces of 3D objects...
But I didn't ask about this. I just asked about the 2D. I don't need you to tell me the rest. So you have a specific way. Yeah, so you have a...
Because this is the real point of contention. Because we agreed on the answer I gave. So let's move to the things we disagree about with, unless
no.
Like
the reason I asked was to make a point.
Yourself to you have stop the traffic.
Well, no, like you're talking about something irrelevant. I want to bring it back to the point that the reason why I asked. The reason why I asked is, well, it's not about agreement. It's about the fact that you know and you experience a form of intelligibility, a meaning to this. Yeah, which is irrelevant to any subjective fiction of yours. It's irrelevant to anybody else's subjective fictions. They made this decide, like you did, that they want to interpret this in 3D. Well, that's not relevant to the issue. That person would be wrong.
You're going to point out that I'm speaking English, like Captain Obvious all the way. Boring. So getting
No,
back
it's
to
not
the
about. It's
goodwill,
not about speaking English. It's about that there is a specific intelligibility. You understood that given a 2D plane, given the ways in which lines converge, given an understanding of what enclosure means, the only possible way that these meaningfully actually come together intelligibly is as a triangle. So when you ask, how can the skeptic engage in rationality without assuming rationality, it's in exactly that way. Because they are not stupid. They understand things, and there doesn't need to be any further justification. But, well, why do you understand a straight line to be this? Because that's what a straight line is, given the current ways in which we communicate. There needs to be no further justification.
but that's like making arbitrary definitions. Like a unicorn always
This
likes
is not
apples.
arbitrary. What is arbitrary about lines? What is arbitrary about the triangle?
Okay, because when you're saying lines, these are abstract things. There's no real lines.
Nobody's asking
Show me a
about that.
real
Nobody's asking about that. I said, like,
Where did
did
you
I
come
ask
with
you?
that?
Okay, but it's like whether these things relate to any reality.
It's
That's
irrelevant.
where
Nobody asked about that. I asked you about a 2D plane.
Okay, but again, there's no such thing as a 2D plane.
I didn't ask you about that. And there's no such thing, and yet you understood it perfectly.
Well,
Which is
then
it?
the skeptic is going to say,
So
like,
which is
three
it?
lines, calm down, take your meds. So on a 2D plane,
You take your meds, bro. You're coming up with all sorts of shit.
Calm down, or you're
In
going to
all
the quiet.
everybody
So,
seems
like,
calm.
on a 2D plane, saying to a skeptic, saying in a 2D plane, the minimum number of straight lines to enclose an area is 3, would be equivalent to saying blah 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 blah.
No, it
it's
isn't.
just
No, it's not.
Yeah, no, it's
You
not.
understand that it's not. You just won't admit it.
Now you're making a fiction now subjective to you about what skepticism is. I've already told you what the skeptic actually is and what they do. If you want to, if you want to keep pretending that a triangle has 5 sides, there's nothing I can do about that retardation.
Let's get, so now we come full circle, like on a sphere, 2D plane on the surface of a 3D object.
Bro,
a real skeptic doesn't say anything; they're quiet.
Well, why should they be skeptical about anything? Why is somebody ever skeptical?
They shouldn't be, and there's no justification to be skeptical. They're just retards.
Well, no. Again, so who are you talking about? The historical skeptics did not do this. So who are you attacking?
Because they weren't actually skeptics.
Well, according to your subjective definition, but I told you what they meant by it and what the word originally means.
Yeah, and that just shows that they're not actually skeptics.
Well, no, according to you, because you have your own subjective definition that has nothing to do with the actual historical meaning.
Well, if you agree with this historical
skepticism just literally means to suspend judgment. That it does not mean I doubt willy-nilly for no reason.
Okay, so for them to suspend judgment, how do you form the notion of suspending judgment without suspending judgment?
The same way you understood the fucking triangle question.
Nah. It assumes they know what judgment is.
That is not assume anything. You didn't assume anything in understanding the fucking triangle question. You didn't. I can ask this to a person who has no background in geometry. They will understand. They will give the right answer. You know why?
Yeah, but
you know why? Because it's not based on fucking definitions. It's based on an actual operational cognitive exercise. You can get a fucking 5-year-old to do this, even without understanding the geometrical terms.
Yeah, but this is like fantasy stuff. Again,
it's not fantasy stuff. The fact that a 5-year-old can do it shows you it's not fantasy stuff. The fact that you answered the same thing as anybody who's intelligent shows you that it's not fantasy stuff. Now it's you pretending to be. Yeah, so now you're pretending to be retarded in a way that a 5-year-old isn't even retarded.
A 2-year-old can explain to me how unicorns behave, right?
No, they can't.
It's real. Yes, they can.
The 2-year-olds can't explain shit.
This isn't unicorns. This is triangles.
Triangles aren't real, mate.
Well, you just told me about one.
Did you understand them? How do you understand?
What do you mean
Triangles are
aren't
entirely
real?
mental objects.
Well, Aquila, when the actual skeptic in the room is laughing at you, that is something telling.
Yeah, it's like he's a fool. So show me a real triangle.
Yeah. He's the fool, right?
Show me a real triangle.
Did things need to be shown for you to causally understand them?
Well, he's already been shown. He literally did it. He literally told us about it. He reported his own experience.
I put
Well,
a
he's asking
triangle
for
in
like
the
a
chat.
pornographic showing of a triangle. He wants you to like give you the immediacy of it, that it's like visual and sensual rather than understood.
So
Okay,
I
so-
put the triangle in the chat. Is there any more information you need on what a triangle?
It's not a real triangle.
What?
What's your?
That's not a real
He
triangle.
won't tell us his category for what's real too when he does this. This is like a bit they do.
So a triangle is just going to be a shape with exactly 3 sides, and a triangle is going to be enclosed, wherein the 3 lines are going to meet end to end, resulting in an enclosed shape. So that's going to be what a triangle.
Okay, well, those lines aren't straight, for starters, so it's not a triangle.
How do you know they're not straight?
Because in physical things, there's no such thing as a straight line.
Okay, so
How do you determine what's
come
not a
to that
triangle without
understanding?
knowing a triangle?
Oh, because it's just an imaginary object. So any representation.
But you said it's not real.
That's a meaningless platitude.
Okay, so do you understand that there's a difference between the real and the
No,
conceptual?
you understand what a triangle is, so tell us what a triangle is. Instead of pretending that you don't understand what a triangle is.
A triangle is three lines, straight lines intersecting with an
How do you know
internal
what a straight
angle.
line is? Why are you
With
like,
an
disputing the claim to what a straight line is?
with an internal total sum of angles of being 180 degrees.
Yeah, so is that going to be internally or externally?
I said internally.
All right.
What does
it mean to be internal though? Because I'm not really, I'm not really sure. How do I know it's enclosed though?
Well, see, in that approximation, which was posted by Amar, the internal would be the parts that are.
How can you approximate something unreal?
Well, because those aren't straight lines.
Yeah, but you said they're not real, so how do you know what a straight line is?
Yeah, how do you know what a straight line is?
No, a straight line is just is a definitional thing. It's not a real thing. So you don't know straight lines, you invent straight lines.
So if you don't know it, then how are you telling us about what isn't them?
Oh, because your imagination's as active as anyone else's, and you can imagine a straight line.
But
Are you just
when I imagine a straight line, I see literally what like Amar posted.
Yeah,
Okay, well, you have
if you're saying you can imagine a straight line, then there are straight lines that are real.
So now you're gonna rely on something unfalsifiable.
Okay, but it's not visual imagination. It's just mathematical imagination.
Is
dimensional
mathematical imagination not real? Is it imaginary or fake?
Imagination. It's imagination.
But imagination is still real.
It's. I mean, it has its own sort of mental reality, but you'd call that imaginary, not real.
Oh, now you're supposing a difference between like mental reality and like other realities.
Yeah.
Sounds like you're giving an account of like cognitive states right now. I mean, I need you to warrant that for me as a skeptic,
Okay. Well, I mean, like if you can imagine anything, it doesn't.
I can name you something I can't imagine.
Okay, so if you can imagine anything, you're not going to find.
I can't
that actual
imagine the absence of imagination.
Yes, you can.
No, you can't.
Definitionally, you can't. That would be a contradiction.
Yes, you can.
So you want to engage in imagination to imagine the absence of imagination.
What?
So imagine.
You can't do that. That's a contradiction.
So imagine what do do rocks think about?
You can't imagine
Nothing. Yeah,
Well,
they
how
don't think.
do you know that rocks don't?
The inability to imagine something is an imagination.
I'm not gonna lie, this is just funny. This is unironically the entire dispute between you and Antonio Wolf is all verbal dispute.
So, ironically, I'm going to get back to the point that he balked at, which is that a perfectly smooth theoretical sphere, its surface, if it's infinitely thin, is actually two-dimensional, even though the sum of it does make a sphere.
Okay. I asked you about a plane. I didn't ask you about a plane through the third dimension, so who cares?
A plane can go through the third dimension.
I didn't ask you about that again. A proper skeptic. A proper skeptic does not inject their own presuppositions. They go exactly by what they're told. And I only told you about a 2D plane. I did not tell you anything about further conditions. So you ought to be, as a proper skeptic, the one who does not presuppose and does not make claims of their own. You go with only what is told.
Terminology.
Yeah,
nothing.
You take the question as basic, and you don't then like say the question.
There's nothing about 2D planes that precludes them curving.
Yeah, there's nothing in the question that I told you that has anything to do with further dimensions. I asked you about a 2D plane. That's all I asked.
It's just injecting filler into the question.
Apply Occam's razor, please.
Do you know what actually makes a curved plane different from a 2D plane?
I do not give a fuck because I asked you about a 2D plane.
Okay. A curved plane with negative curvature cannot
I did not give a fuck. I asked you about a 2D plane, not a 2D plane through the 3D or 4D or 5D or 60 or 70 or 70 or 100D.
Do you know why it can't be?
I didn't ask you.
Yeah,
Again, I asked you about a 2D plane.
Yeah, nobody cares about non-Euclidean geometry. We're asking very simple questions.
Yeah. Do you know why it can't be infinite?
It's irrelevant. That is not relevant.
Cool. Do you know why?
You know what a tangent is? It exists in geometry and argumentation as well.
Do you know what a chicken is?
Yeah.
What is a chicken?
It's a concept which sort of encapsulates sort of
a chicken is a concept?
Abstract, something abstract.
And anybody else here think that a chicken is a concept? I thought a chicken was, an actual animal.
Right now. What the
Yeah, I thought to put it in Aquilus terms, I thought it was real.
I'm eating a concept? You're telling me I'm eating a concept? What?
So to finish my answer,
language.
Yeah, I know you homos like to jump in. Like you homos like to jump. You like to jump up people's asses. But get out of mine, thanks. So, yeah, like a chicken is an abstract concept, but it's abstracted from a large number of.
You don't think chickens are real?
They share properties. They share properties, right?
So chickens aren't real?
We haven't.
Is that a concept in your profile picture?
Yeah, like there's no such thing as saying a chicken unless you have a mind.
You don't think chickens are real? Do you think chickens exist only because we're here to say the word chicken?
So there are real things to which you can apply the notion of chicken.
There's no perfect chicken, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so this is what you're doing. Someone will ask you a question and they're trying to refer to the referent and not the reference, and you'll keep trying to analyze the reference as opposed to the referent. So when someone like AW says chicken, they're clearly not referring to the word chicken. They're referring to what the word chicken refers to.
Yeah, but then they'd be asking about this animal or this thing, right?
That's just more strings of words. The point is, if you play this game and act like you don't know what anyone's talking about, it's very, very uninteresting.
I do know what they're talking about. I do know what they're talking about because we're talking about something abstract.
We know you know what they're talking about. You're just choosing.
Like,
I'm not talking
like,
about something abstract. Hold on. Don't put words in our mouths. Don't put words in my mouth, at least. Because
What
I'm
I
talking
don't
about
know-
not an abstraction.
what
I'm
I
talking
don't
about an
know-
actual creature
what I don't
in
know
front of
when he says
me.
the word-
I'm literally looking at a picture, and if I could go down to the local farm, I could actually grab that creature and hug it
but
and
you
pet
have to
it, and it'll
specify. You
squawk,
have to
and all
specify
these
what
other
color.
things.
Eat it.
This is where you'd have to specify. If you're thinking of a particular, you're going to have to specify more than just chicken. You're going to have to say
Oh my
color,
god,
male,
you know,
female.
this is like word selling to the max. When your mom asks you to go get some chicken from the store, you're not gonna bring back home a concept. She's gonna slap you across the face.
Maybe he brings back chicken flavored condoms or something.
What you're going to do is something.
He's bringing
something-
it for all us homos.
What
You
you're
only
gonna
do
do-
this online with the veneer of like trolling other
When
people.
you're
like,
asked
a
to go and
chicken's a
get a
fucking
chicken-
chicken, man. For God's sake.
No. When you're asked to get a chicken, you're going to get something to which that definition can apply. Now, if you're inexperienced,
Yeah,
you might
you're
come
gonna get
back.
chicken.
You might come back with a frozen turkey if you're inexperienced and it's not properly labeled, right?
Why
Because
are you adding all these different like?
Yeah,
Oh well,
Aquila.
yeah, a meteor might strike the planet and we might all die on the way to get the chicken. What the fuck? Like
Yeah,
it's like
Aquila,
The
when
point
when
is-
AW
the point
it's like
is-
nebulous.
if your notion,
If you're
if your
opening the
notion of
door for
chicken-
anything
if
and
your-
everything, that just means
if
it's
your
nothing.
notion- If your notion of chicken is incomplete, you could literally pick up a ham and think it's a chicken.
Who said my notion of chicken is incomplete? Maybe your notion of chicken is incomplete.
Aquila, when
no
AW
notion-
says chicken, he's referring to that
like
actual
no
creature.
notion of chicken is going to account for every single individual chicken. So if you want me to go and get a particular chicken, you're going to have to describe it more than just saying chicken.
Well, he's not
Oh my
asking for a
god! You know what the
particular
implication is when someone as close as your family tells you to go get chicken from the store. They don't tell
Do
you
you
to bring home a concept.
Aquila, when you last went to go get a food item that your maybe spouse or like family asked for, did you
Yeah.
bring back a concept?
So no, when I went out to get something which counts as food, I brought things back which comport with the concept.
The
which
reason
are
why we're
conceivable.
bringing it back to your familial level is because this is kind of like, well, if you act this way like online, how do you act with your family? It's like square
So
that with
to-
us.
So to some people,
Are you
things
like a pedantic retard in
to
real
some
life
people,
too?
things
In
like
your daily
coffee-
social life?
Yeah, like do you feel proud of this, man? Like, do you feel fulfilled, like coming online and pretending to be
Let me ask
retarded?
you, does tea and coffee count as food to you? Does tea and coffee count as food to you?
Yes.
Why? Why does it count as food?
Well, I'd say it's a drink.
Because you can eat and drink them.
Okay. Well, I mean, you can eat and drink sand, right? Sand and seawater.
I don't
Are
know
they
if I
food?
could drink sand.
Well, this is why I'm saying your notion of what food is not very good if you're going to say just because you can eat and drink it.
Yeah,
Well,
eating sand
it
is
can
good,
be
though.
food.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
look. There was
That's
this
what-
lady
that's
in
why
Colombia.
it's
There was this lady in Colombia like
notion
20
of
years
food-
ago who
the
famously
notion of
like
food
was like
includes things that
90,
can nourish-
and she
tea
ate
and coffee
sand
cannot
from the
nourish you.
local river, and she claimed that was the reason for her longevity. Who's to say that
Okay,
woman
but-
was wrong?
Well,
Sand
the
is
fact that you
food.
can eat, so no, being able to eat and drink it is only part of the notion of food. Part of the notion of food is that it nourishes you. Now, tea doesn't nourish you, so
Says
arguably,
who?
it's
Says
tea
you?
is not a food. Well, factually, it's got no calories.
What do you mean factually? Like food is just a concept, and nutrition is just a concept, according to you.
But when you have the concept of nutrition, you can't really apply it to tea.
Yeah,
Sure
I
you
mean,
can.
I probably could, yeah.
There are literally brands that will tell you like tea is nutritious for you. Like they're like this is like nutritionally like
nourishment-
advanced tea.
Stop being gay, and just tell me what nourishment does tea give you?
I don't
But,
drink
mean,
tea.
It depends which tea you
The
take,
only
but-
tea I drink is like Thai tea with like boba, and that's not real tea.
Yeah, I actually had Thai tea today. I had Thai food. It was really good.
I mean,
that's totally unrelated.
No, you didn't.
I think it is I think it is trivial.
I had
that
the
tea
concept of
provides
Thai
you
food,
some
my
form
bad.
of nourishment, whether it be vitamins or something else.
Yeah, so or wait, are you asking for like the benefits of tea or like actual like
Yeah, what is
nutrient-
nourishment?
What
Yeah, 'cause,
nutrients does tea have?
Yeah, so
Vitamins,
according
for
to
instance.
some companies, green tea improves heart health, regulates blood pressure, promotes weight loss, boosts immune system.
That sounds more like a
improves
medication
brain
than a
health,
nutrient.
promotes digestive health.
I would say that's
stimulates hair
nourishing.
growth. treats
That's
acne and
medication you're
pimples,
describing.
No, I would say all
balances
that's
type
nourishing.
2
Yeah, it has
diabetes,
an impact
and
on your
prevents tooth
metabolism.
decay. That's pretty nourishing.
Like water's
That's not
nourishing.
nourishment.
Water's
That's not
nourishing.
nourishment. That's medical.
Do you think carbohydrates are nourishing?
Yes.
Okay, well, carbohydrates are in tea.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, so sodium as well, a little bit of caffeine, vitamin like B1, a precursor to vitamin A, I think it is. Like
Wait, yeah, that's like 3 grams of carbohydrate on anise tea.
A bit of caffeine, which nourishes the mind.
You count anise as tea? Because to me, that's a spice.
Anise. Okay. Well, do we want to? Okay, I'll look up green tea. All right. Nobody can dispute green tea as a tea. All right. It can. Do you think potassium is nutritious?
No.
Are potatoes nutritious?
What do you think? What do you eat bananas for?
I don't.
You don't eat bananas.
Probably need to get some potassium, boy. I think that's part of why your judgment is lacking. You need some of that.
That explains a lot
malnourished.
about your brain health.
He's
Wait,
malnourished.
okay, how about this? Do you think protein is nourishing?
Yes.
Green tea has protein.
Okay.
You know what else
Does
has
it
protein?
Can you actually digest the protein in green tea?
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you
Yeah,
mean?
limit
Are
it
you
in
not
amounts.
gonna? Is it just gonna come out your eyeballs? Like, what do you mean? Can you not digest?
Well, because I presume most of the protein in green tea stays inside the tea bag and doesn't come out in the water. And you don't consume the leaves.
Are you really gonna
Unless
die
you
on
have
this hill?
like Japanese stuff, matcha, whatever.
You can't just
Matcha?
concede that tea can nourish you. Like it's very trivial. It's
Okay,
not that-
okay. Do you think water nourishes you?
No.
So, what is your definition of nourishment?
So, where it supplies you with either energy for metabolism.
Do you think that you will have energy if you do not drink water?
Yeah, you ever been dehydrated?
Yeah. So you think if I just
do you know what
don't drink water
electrolytes
for
are?
20 days, my energy levels will be stable?
Yeah,
Isn't
Aquila,
isn't electrolytes
You
what
don't
plants
have to drink
crave?
water. You can just eat. You don't have to drink water. You can just eat watermelon, Jello, whatever.
Actually, that's a good point.
No, wait, wait, wait.
Electrolytes. Are electrolytes nourishing?
They're what plants crave.
Not really. Not really.
Not really.
Although-
Okay. Wow.
No, the point.
At
Wait,
this
hold
point,
on,
you're
hold on.
just being
Yeah,
a,
the point. The point is, he
That's-
said that water
that's
does
why
not
they're called
nourish you because it
electrolytes.
doesn't give you energy, but water has electrolytes, which by definition energize you.
No, they don't.
He's just a
Okay.
sophist, guys. Like it depends on who's asking him the question entirely.
No, because
This
see,
isn't even like sophistry, man. Like, this is like the most
No,
self-owned that
nutrient-
we've had on this like room
Yeah,
in a
okay,
long
so
time.
I mean, he's posting his own L
nutrients-
because he doesn't want to drop the bit.
nutrients
hold on,
It's not
hold on, hold on.
advantageous to him.
Nutrients
Listen,
Okay,
provide
okay.
Aquila.
Would you
energy.
say, Aquila, would you say
Nutrients provide you energy, or they are building blocks for vital components. Like electrolytes, they come and go, and they just facilitate the
So-
process of metabolism, but they don't actually like become part
So,
of your body or
Aquila.
building.
well, they do
Aquila,
become part of your body?
Yeah, like
because electrolytes
90% of
are
your body
minerals.
is like water.
Okay, so
right?
like,
Electrolytes
just
are
if you're-
minerals that conduct
Okay, so
electrical
if you're
charges in
starving,
your
if you're
body.
starving, if you're starving, can you just take electrolytes? You know, because you've got no carbohydrates or protein to consume.
Yeah,
You can just
if you're
survive with
starving
That's
and you eat like
entirely
food without
different
water,
forms
without
of
electrolytes, you'll die too.
Yeah, and this is
No, you
this is
won't.
fallacious
You
because
won't.
to say that one thing isn't sufficient for all of your nutritional needs isn't to say that that's not nutritious. I mean, electrolytes have things like sodium, they have certain minerals, calcium, potassium, which nourish you and aid in key bodily functions. They do. I mean, even I just looked at medlineplus.gov. It says electrolytes move nutrients into your cells, move waste out of
They
your cells.
move nutrients into your cells. They themselves are not nutrients. Fuck's sake.
Okay, so would you say
Nutrition is a
that-
holistic composition of
Yeah.
multiple different factors. That's
So
what
you
you're
don't
not
think
understanding.
sodium, calcium, and potassium are nutritious?
No, they're not. You can't survive off them if you're like you have no other
And
food.
you
you've just
can't
got
survive
sodium and
without them
potassium.
either.
Aquila,
but-
so Is the conduction of electricity that allows the transmission of messages between cells important?
Yes.
Would you say that's vital to human
Yes.
beings? Okay.
Well,
Yes.
Wait till you find out that's what electrolytes allow you to do.
Yeah, here's what he's
I know
doing.
that.
Maybe
He's
not for
saying,
Aquila's brain cells, you know.
he's saying there's a
What they
chair
do.
with he's saying there's a chair with 4 legs, but the legs don't actually help the chair stay up because if you remove one of the legs, it falls over. That's what he's saying is if you
No,
remove
what
this
I'm
one piece,
saying
then it's
is
not
like
actually
you've got a
contributing
chair.
anything.
A chair is for seating, right? But you need a floor for the chair to sit on, so you can sit on the chair, right? The
Oh, so
electrolytes might be
chairs
like
don't
the
really
floor.
stand up. You're right. You're right.
Well, like nutrition without electrolytes is maybe like a chair without the floor.
What if
No,
you
it's a
use chairs
chair.
for eating? I mean, that's what a
Mate.
table is.
How do you like if there's like a shortage of seats in a bar, how do you make more seats for if in a gay bar?
I don't drink.
Electrolytes.
You flip the stools upside down. You can fit 4 times as many people.
Or you make like the Japanese and you sit your ass on the ground.
Drinks are too expensive at a bar. Way too overpriced. You never catch me dead at a bar.
Well, yeah,
You
because
could
you're not a
drink tea.
woman. Women get them for free, and that's why they
You could
charge
drink
you
tea.
higher.
Yeah. Not to mention like the water,
but
the liquid
alcohol is
displacement with
nutritious.
like the amount of ice they put in the drinks. It's like insane.
Alcohol is nutritious, apparently.
Alcohol is nutritious, but water's not.
Yeah, alcohol is carbohydrates.
I mean, that's pretty much all he's been on the past.
That might
his entire
explain.
life.
That might explain his cognitive failures here. He's been drinking pure water, 90%. Well, not pure water, pure alcohol. 90% proof, you know.
I don't drink that much alcohol.
Just
not that
maximizing
much.
those
An alcoholic
nutrients.
never admits that they're an alcoholic.
At this
I mean,
point,
I
it's
might-
just downing ice.
He's just a
cold.
social drinker, guys. He's a social drinker.
I might have the equivalent of a shot of whiskey once a fortnight or once a month, but that's about it.
Once a fortnight.
Would you say that you have it along with Fortnite balls?
So, yesterday I had a swig of red wine because I was making.
Wait, how do you know that you were taking a swig of wine though? Like that's just kind of a concept.
It's the concept.
And because I was making bolognese, and you put red wine in bolognese, but does
I knew I was
swig
taking a swig of
right
wine because I was making bolognese, bro.
The logic is flawless.
I was going to put the whole bottle in the sauce, but I thought I'd just try it first, so I took a swig. Yeah. But before
Yeah.
that, yeah.
So how do you know that the concept is embodied in reality?
That
The
too is
concept
just a
of wine.
concept.
Well,
I think it's fair to say we can dismiss Aquila as like a helic. You know, you can just
No,
be
but this is where you get like
removed
weird.
instead of entertaining him further.
It's just funny, I think.
Does port? Does that count as a wine? That's where you get these weird questions because you've got like the abstract of a concept of wine, and what it actually can apply to is like spoiled.
I'll be honest, port makes me feel sick.
I mean, my tummy hurt.
If a mat
It
is
honestly
matted,
does.
is a cat catted?
No, I used to be able to drink port, but the thing is that there was one time when I had it where I got really sick, and now I just like can't drink it very much.
Do you think whiners drink wine?
It's good if you're cold though. Like if you're feeling cold, it can give you like a warmer sense.
Any vodka will do that too. Yeah.
That's because it dilates your blood vessels. But the problem with that is that the blood now goes to your extremities, and your core temperature drops.
Does
So if you're
anybody
cold,
else
don't drink
have
alcohol.
anything else like interesting to say?
I think it's like 2
I
a.m.
want to
or
go back to
something. I imagine all
discussing
the
these
conversations
retarded
are dead.
ancient skeptics. Who cares about them?
All right, well, this was a fun chat. Nothing productive got done, but that's okay.